Yeah, I think that makes. Good evening, everyone. We're going to call the school committee meeting to order. Today is Monday, November 18th, 2019. And the order of business this evening, we're going to take a couple of items out of order on the agenda if there's no objection. First would be we will rise and salute our flag. We're then going to have a moment of silence for all those who have served our country. We'll then take attendance to ensure that we have the requisite number of members here to conduct business. And then we'll get into this evening's agenda. We are going to take up the approval of the minutes first, followed by public comment. We will then move, if there's no objection, down to item 4 and take out of order the Social, Emotional, and Physical Well-Being Ad Hoc Subcommittee led by Ms. Beardsley, who will join others to make a presentation regarding recess. We'll then jump back up to the superintendent's report, where we will hear from Principal Concannon and Ms. Sullivan about the Forestdale School 8th grade Washington, D.C. trip. Then we will do the English learner presentation. And then finally, we will hear from our own State Senator Jason Lewis, who is going to speak to us this evening about the Student Opportunity Act. So try to follow along with us. It's a little disjointed, but after that, we will get back to the regular order of business. So are there any questions? Ms. Spatafor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only request is when we stand to salute the flag, can we have a moment of silence for those that lost their lives in California and Santa Clarita in the school shooting?
Of course.
Thank you.
Any objection? Chair hears none. So please join with us to salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of all those who have fought for our country and continue to do so. And also another moment of silence in what Ms. Spatafor said about what happened in California. Thank you. You may be seated. Now let's take attendance. Will the clerk do so now?
Mayor Christensen?
Here.
Ms. Beardsley? Here. Ms. Bolinaro? Here. Mr. Drummy?
Here.
Mr. Froyo?
Here.
Mr. Iovino?
Here.
Ms. Leon? Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
Ms. Spatafora?
Here.
Superintendent Notary?
Here.
Student Representative Chowiki? Here.
So we have a quorum sufficient to meet this evening. We're now going to open up public comment. This is an opportunity for anybody wishing to address the school committee to do so. We just ask that you state your name and address for the record and keep your remarks to a minimum of a couple of minutes. Again, just try to keep in mind we have several presentations to follow. So again, public comment is now open.
Good evening, Mayor Christensen, Superintendent Oteri, and members of the Malden School Committee.
Good evening.
As you all know by now, my name is Deb Oswaldo. I'm an educator here in Malden. President of the Malden Education Association and the East Region Director of the National Council of Urban Education Associations. I'm here tonight to speak about something our students need to support their physical well-being and their social-emotional well-being in school. It's a subject we haven't often spoken about because it does not impact many of us directly, and that is the issue of inclusive bathroom policies. We have students who need inclusive bathroom policies, which include access to gender-neutral bathrooms to maintain their physical health and well-being, as well as their social-emotional health and well-being. Students who are non-binary, transgender, and gender non-conforming who may not be comfortable using gendered bathrooms need access to bathrooms that are not far away from their learning environment. In other words, students should not have to go all of the way to the nurse's office to use the bathroom. Healthy students should not be going to visit the nurse to use the restroom. I know that Central Office Administration has started conversations with some stakeholders to begin looking at more inclusive and equitable policies and facilities, and I encourage district and school administration to look at how to provide gender-neutral restrooms in all schools that are convenient to students, and to also make sure students know that they may use the bathroom that is right for them, whether that is a gendered bathroom or a gender-neutral bathroom. Inclusive bathroom policies do not compromise the safety of any students, whether they are cisgender, non-binary, transgender, or gender non-conforming. Inclusive bathroom policies keep students safe, healthy, and supported. The Malden Education Association leadership, our building representatives, and the rank and file members who support inclusive bathroom policies would be happy to work with district and school administration to support our students. All students, whether they are cisgender, transgender, non-binary, or gender non-conforming, need access to bathroom facilities that are accessible, safe, and inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee can do so now.
Go ahead. I'll sit here and wait. Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
name is Kathleen Sullivan. I live at 27 Oliver Street, and I teach grade 5 science at the Salemwood School. I'm here tonight to extend an invitation to the school committee, the Salemwood community, and all Malden Public School families and Malden residents. We'd like interested parties to attend the upcoming meeting about the planned renovation of the Salemwood Field, also known as Roosevelt Park, from a grass field to an artificial turf athletic field. As many of you know, this project has stirred up many feelings of discontent. The concerns about converting the current grass field into a plastic grass athletic field are threefold. First, removing grass to replace it with plastic is counterproductive to the work we need to do as a society to reverse the effects we are experiencing from climate change as a result of human missteps. At a time when we should be looking to reduce the use of plastic, we are instead planning to add 3 acres of plastic and rubber backing material, which will produce thousands of pounds of disposable waste and leach chemicals into the ground and the abutting wetlands. There is an item on the agenda tonight that highlights the need for children to have more recess time. More unstructured playtime on natural grass surface benefits children and adults from a social and emotional perspective. Simply put, it just makes you feel better to interact and play on natural grass. Finally, there is an ongoing concern about the safety of the products being used on these fields. There are currently several studies that are underway which are researching the health and safety aspects of artificial turf. Pediatricians and epidemiologists have testified to the EPA and to a California study group and supplied documented health reviews which outline the concerns of medical professionals about the effects of these products on young children whose bodies are in the developmental stages. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you next Monday at 6:30 at Salemwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee? Good evening.
Hi. My name is Nicole Queen, and I live on Mount Vernon Park.
Welcome.
I want to thank you for letting me speak today. First, I wanted to just mention that I'm in full support of longer recess times, as well as recess for all ages in the grammar and middle schools. I'm actually pleased to see this on the agenda today, because it's been bounced around, so I'm hoping that we can move forward on that issue. However, my main reason for being here today is to support real change for transgender youth in our city. namely with increased education for parents and teachers and students, and by instituting gender-neutral bathrooms. Malden Public Schools have a very unique opportunity right now as Malden is shining. We've had an influx of construction and population, and we've had an increase in diversity. But sadly, we have not had an increase in acceptance to go along with that. My son is transgender. His name is Miles, and he's 13. He's been in the Malden schools for his whole school career. 3 years ago, he came out as Miles to the world, including to school and peers. Since then, things have changed drastically, and not for the better. He is no longer in the advanced program due to bullying. He spends his time anxious, and he struggles to do his work. People confuse sexuality with gender identity. They do not understand the concept of your brain knowing you are one gender, but your body is biologically the opposite gender. For Miles, this has brought about intense gender dysphoria. According to the American Psychiatric Association, studies show people with gender dysphoria have a conflict between their physical and assigned gender and the gender that they identify with, and that this almost always causes considerable stress. The same studies show that CT and MRI scans of transgender people, their brains match the identity that they have. Miles's brain looks and is the same as any other biological male brain. Now, I want you to think about how that would feel as a child and how it would change your whole world. The chaos in your mind and the fear in an already turbulent time. You look and feel wrong in your skin. You hate it. You want to pull your hair out. You want to bind parts of your body just to feel right. You blame yourself for the actions of others because there's no acceptance. There's only assumptions and continued resistance to being your authentic self. And you are afraid. And Miles is afraid. He's reminded every school day that he looks like a girl but is a boy. He gets misgendered daily at school despite the fact that he has been out for 3 years. They even have sometimes called him by his dead name. After 3 years, any misgendering is an act of aggression. I am sick of hearing, "Sorry, I forgot. It was a mistake. I'm feeling tired today. It just slipped out." Or, "I didn't understand." There's no excuse. There's only a lack of education and acceptance. It's the same lack of understanding that caused a child to call my son an effing faggot on the schoolyard. I'm raising an alarm for a transgender youth population in our city. I'm screaming because it's an emergency. This should have been done years ago. Transgender youth are hiding. They're invisible. They struggle with bullying and fear. They lack the support of their peers because their peers lack education, as do school staff and parents alike because they resist change. For every Miles, how many more kids are out there suffering because their moms aren't as loud as me? I could get into the rate of suicides when it comes to transgender youth or the incidence of violence in bathrooms, locker rooms, but instead I want practical solutions to get the youth the acceptance that they deserve in schools. Prompt education of staff, parents, and students, and gender-neutral bathrooms. My son can't use the bathroom at school. If he goes to the boys' room, he is teased and bullied. If he goes to the girls' room, it's a reminder that he still isn't who he knows he is. It is painful and embarrassing. If he goes to the nurse's office, he misses class time and exposes himself to germs unnecessarily. So again, my son doesn't go to the bathroom at school anymore. He holds it. This intensifies his dysphoria and causes damage to his body, including UTIs and kidney damage. So the discussion is now out in the open. I repeat, it's an emergency. The change is needed not now, but years ago. In many ways, it's too late for Miles. He's going to high school next year, and not in Malden. He has looked to the vocational schools in the area where they do indeed have gender-neutral bathrooms. And it will be a new start where he won't have to depend on the actions of others to define himself. He will appear as Miles and hopefully not be saddled with the frozen perceptions of him that have tortured him at the Malden schools. I repeat, it's too late for my child, but it is not too late for all the other children out there. They can still be protected and they do not have to be broken. Gender-neutral bathrooms that are not isolated, available on every floor of Malden schools. That's my dream. education and a new sign. That's it. That's all I want. And I'm not unwilling to compromise. I would settle for just the bathrooms at Linden, where my child is. I've found that to be a very fostering environment. Mr. Garcia and Kim O'Connor have been exceptional with Miles. I'm sorry, I know I'm over, but I'm never here, so give me a couple more minutes. I'm just kidding, just 30 seconds. I can't save the world, and I can't even save my child from his pain. But I can help those that are behind Miles, and at least maybe for 7 months, my child could use the bathroom at school. That's really all I'm asking. I went to Superintendent Oteri. I also want to just mention that he met me with open arms and had an immediate conversation with me and told me that he would definitely put it on the agenda. So I'd really like to thank you a lot for that. I also touched base with Mayor Christensen, who helped me when Miles was a toddler and was more than happy to help me again. So I'd just like to thank you for listening to me. And I really look forward to helping any way I can in moving this forward, because these are life-saving changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, public comment remains open. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is also Miles. I'm a resident of 57 Church Street here in Malden. I'm here tonight on behalf of my wife, Reverend Emily Hamilton, to share a public comment on this topic as she is out of town. Members of the school committee, greetings from First Lutheran Church. I'm sorry to miss today's meeting because the rights and dignity of transgender, non-binary, and gender nonconforming youth matter deeply to me and my congregation. Since 2017, our congregation has been officially welcoming to transgender people. That same year, we switched our restrooms to be gender neutral. Gender neutral bathrooms create a safer environment for trans folks. They lessen stigma attached to who uses which restroom and what they look like. They create physical safety for those who may face violence if they're perceived to be using the wrong restroom, and psychological safety from bullying. As Christians, we believe each person is made in God's image and that diversity is a gift. We know that transgender youth are beloved by God and deserve a safe and equitable learning environment. As a called and ordained pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, I ask you to support this initiative for the sake of all of Malden's children. Peace be with you, Reverend Emily Hamilton, First Lutheran Church in Malden. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee can do so now.
Hi, I'm Karen Cologne Hayes, 105 Wyoming Avenue in Malden. I actually wasn't planning on speaking today, but I just wanted to stand up after hearing Nicole and a story about Miles to say that I absolutely support gender-neutral bathrooms in all the schools, and anything that I could do to help move that along education-wise or anything, I'd be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee?
Hi, good evening. My name's Otto. I live at 45 Havelock Street. I am the Reverend Otto OConnor. I'm the minister at the First Parish of Malden Unitarian Universalist Church. And I speak this evening not only as a minister, though my faith teaches me that everyone has inherent worth and dignity, which means inherent worth and dignity to find a place to go to the bathroom. I speak not only as a minister, I also speak as a transgender man. It may seem obvious to you what bathroom I should use, but it wasn't always this case for me. I knew that for this period of time in my life when I was not obviously a man or a woman, anytime I went to a school or an institution or even a cafe, I would look to see if there was a gender-neutral bathroom, because that was how I knew that that space was comfortable for me. That was a space that I could be welcome there, that I could use the bathroom. So I encourage you, as you consider this idea of gender-neutral bathrooms in the high school, in the schools in Malden, to consider how your students and children feel. Because I'm certain that there are non-binary and transgender students at the school and children and youth who feel the way that I did. So I please ask that you consider this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee can do so now.
Hello, my name is Emily Taylor. I go to the Linden STEAM Academy. I'm in grade 7. And I came here to talk about recess, and I'll get to that. But the gender-neutral bathrooms are very important because Miles is my best friend, and I don't want him to feel like he doesn't have a place in the school. He's like my brother. Now on to the recess. When we get back from recess, today at recess, they told us that we didn't go outside because it was raining, so we started talking. And then at the end of lunch, they told us that we didn't go outside because we were talking. And they often hold us back from recess for maybe 4 kids misbehaving. And the little time we do have at recess, if they don't take it away, is not enough for us because I see kids running around in the classrooms, fighting in the classrooms, not listening to the teachers because they don't have enough time to just relax and talk to their friends. And our assistant principal for 5 to 8 has us sit by homerooms now. So I know I have maybe one friend in my homeroom, and then all my other friends are in different homerooms, so I can't really sit with them and talk with them at lunch. And so we're not really paying attention in class because we don't get enough time to just relax and talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee can do so now. Otherwise, we're going to get to these presentations. Good evening.
Quick. Kimberly Gillette, 3 Sheridan, Malden. I wasn't planning on getting up for public comment, but Nicole's speech really moved me. As a lifelong Malden resident, having gone to Malden High School in a really hostile environment for LGBTQ, coming out at a young age, it really, Miles, my heart breaks for you. I really hope Malden has a better environment for me to send my kids to than the one that I went through. I know it was just starting then, and we just opened our eyes, but it's been 20 years since I attended that high school, and I implore you to make that change. And while I'm up here, Tara's going to present a really, really meaningful presentation on recess that has been so many parents have put their input and time and energy, and I can only be here as a presenter tonight, and I can only thank all these amazing parents who couldn't make it here tonight because there are so many parents and teachers that want to see this happen. And from what I understand, and I do the rounds and I do the calls, from what I understand, it's a permission standpoint. It's a changing of word. It's recess to unstructured time. It's on-time learning. It's a matter of 3 minutes off this, 2 minutes off that. So I know it can be done, and I know that we have the resources, the time, and the people. So I guess it's really just the permission. So you'll hear all the kids tonight. I don't need to tell you that my kid wants more recess. I've been saying it to you for 2 years. He spoke in front of this before. We're up here again. We had dinner real quick tonight to get out the door because this is really, really, really important. So I implore you on 2 counts tonight. I was only here for 1, but the gender-neutral bathrooms, I mean, it's time. And recess, we have to listen. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ryan OMalley. I'm the Ward 4 City Councilor. This is actually my first time ever addressing the school committee. I just wanted to also express my support of gender-neutral bathrooms. I was very moved last year when the students organized the first ever Pride flag raising at Malden High School. And I just really want to extend my appreciation to Superintendent Otiri, the mayor, and the entire school committee for taking the correct action on this matter. And then recess is awesome, so whatever we can do to fix that. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Otherwise, good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Oberto. I've never done this before, so excuse me if I...
No worries.
So I live on Laurel Street in Ward 6. I'm coming actually to... I realize this might be the unpopular position of the night. I'm actually coming up here to speak in my support of gendered bathrooms. I didn't hear Miles' speech. All the compassion in the world goes out to him and to people in a similar circumstance, and I don't think it's right for anybody to feel discriminated against or to have difficulty using the bathroom. And I think that there are probably accommodations we can make or teaching children to be kind and respectful, but I think at the same time we can maintain our gendered bathrooms. Because I'm just thinking when I was in middle school, I'm not sure that I probably wouldn't have felt comfortable using a bathroom. And I'm not talking the single stall bathrooms, like that's just silly, but like the multi-stall bathrooms. It could bring up a whole host of other issues that we might not be prepared to answer there either. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee?
Hi, Julien Orsino, 50 Wiley Street. Again, in support of the gender-neutral bathrooms. I'm an active member of the Malden LGBTQ community, and what's amazing is we have a very vibrant Malden LGBTQ community. I'm also a very active member of the community, and we're talking about very specific students when we're talking about this. But one thing that we may want to also consider is these folks are just asking for an accommodation. So students ask for accommodations all the time. We have student athletes. We build locker rooms. Kids need reading programs. My daughter needs a speech program. So if you really think about this as just asking for an accommodation for a student, when you get pushback, and my guess is you're going to get a little pushback, if you view it that way, it's a little easier to say we're accommodating our student body. I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening, everyone. And I thank you, Nicole, for being so brave to come up here.
Thank you. Public comment remains open.
I promise I'll keep this brief. Keith Bernard, 58 Almont Street. Usually I would go and have something prepared, but I didn't. And I have to go and say that Nicole talked to me when I first started going and running for school committee. And she said, would you go and support a gender-neutral bathroom? And I said, absolutely. Last summer, I was recruited to go and help out with defending our state's accommodation laws. So I went and I took every Monday. I would go and I would rush to go and get from work, drive to the first parish, pull out my cell phone, and then spend 3 hours calling people to go and say, can we get you behind this? I have stories to tell. And just to go and come up with some sort of to make sure that we go and we support what's basically a human right. To be able to go and use facilities that you're comfortable with, to not be discriminated against because of your gender identity or your gender presentation. And luckily we won last year, and it was resounding. And I think that we did this in Malden, and that this was kind of the hub of where we could go and we could make these phone calls across the state to go and recognize that. I think we can go and continue that streak and actually go and make this something that we can go and we can present forward in our school systems so that kids that are maybe not sure where they're at, maybe need to go and have a safe place to go to the bathroom where they can go and they can be free from bullying, free from judgment, and a safe space that they can actually go, not have to go and hold it until they get home, and just take a moment and be able to go and provide these facilities. I support this wholly, and I hope that you all consider it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee?
Good afternoon or good evening. Adam Weldine, 97 Hill Street. I'm also here to speak in support of the gender-neutral bathrooms, and I wasn't planning on it, but as I was listening to the folks who were speaking, it dawned on me, you're going to hear tonight the recess presentation. And this is something that Tara has been working on tirelessly for years, and it's taken a lot of work, and there's a lot of effort, and there are a lot of pieces that go into that involving negotiating contracts and things like that. The gender-neutral bathrooms are something that you could do tomorrow. It doesn't involve talking about it. It doesn't involve workshopping it. It's something that we could do tomorrow to make kids feel safer in our buildings. So I implore you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Jeff Taylor, 57 Mount Vernon Street, Ward 5. So I have two daughters at the Linden School, one who will be growing into a Malden public school student, and I'd like to speak in favor of non-gendered bathrooms. Gender non-conforming kids should feel safe at school to be able to use the bathroom and not have to worry about additional bullying that they're going to be facing anyways. The building itself should be a place that welcomes them as a person and respects them as a person. And like Adam just said, it's something that we could do tomorrow, that it shouldn't cost any additional funding or doesn't have to be worked into contracts. It's something that I think we should be doing as soon as possible, which seems like could be done this week. And I don't see why it wouldn't be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Anybody else wishing to address the school committee can do so now. Okay, we're going to conclude that portion of the meeting. So let's go back to item 1, which I neglected to take up first. This is the approval of the minutes, October 7th. Entertain a motion. Mr. McCarthy moves, seconded by Mr. Froyo. Any discussion on the minutes from October 7th? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. All right, so now we're going to jump down to the recess presentation. I assume, Ms. Beardsley, you would like us to head out there, and then what we'll do is we'll come back to ask any questions of it.
Second, right. Then you. Okay, wait. You want to get them in order while I. Okay.
While everyone's moving, I just wanted anyone that actually participated in the survey, in the parent-driven meetings, in anything having to do with recess, they could just stand up right now. They're here. A lot of time and a lot of people have put a lot of effort into this. And like Adam said, that was very good. There are a lot of parts to it, and we do understand that. So we're going to present, the students, parents, and I are going to present. This presentation is called, I have to take the clicker, hold on. So we're saying unstructured learning time and recess, and we'll talk about that. They're both similar, but they're different as well. So we're trying to develop an action plan to respond to student and family voice. Mr. Christensen always tells us he hears problems all the time. He wants to hear solutions. So we're coming here to tell you about some solutions we've come up with. Very talented artist here, Carrie Percival, did these graphics. And this was all, like I said, research created and presented by Malden Public School families. So as a school committee, we're here to represent students and families. We often talk about needs, student needs, but when have we checked what they really want? Let's take a minute and listen to their words. Students and families across this district presented with a common need, more unstructured time. This was driven by students and families. So these are all slides from the survey that we gave out, and I think about 2,000 people responded. Families and students.
So more than half of students and parents wanted more than just 15 minutes of recess. They wanted more like a half an hour because you will go from work and teachers will threaten you for recess to be taken away.
Next slide. All these survey results were given to school committee and they'll be given out on the website. So this is how would you like recess improved? We asked them to check all that apply.
Students overwhelmingly want more time, equipment, and access to different areas at the school. Thank you. Goodbye. This word cloud represents the feedback from 338 students who repeatedly used the words more, time, and recess.
Hi, this is students' additional feedback. They're gonna read. We got 338 responses, and we took 5 out, and we're just gonna read them aloud.
I think that we don't have enough time at recess to have a break from student learning. Thank you for asking.
Can you please add more recess time? Also, can you guys add equipment like jump ropes, hula hoops, balls, etc.?
I am in middle school in 7th grade, and we barely have recess. We need to have some social interaction because at lunch we can't sit with our friends.
Recess is a really nice way for students to take a break from classwork, but it's not really fair that students have 6 hours of class and only 15 minutes of recess.
I would want 30 minutes of recess because I would want the beauty of fresh air and I want to stay active.
Awesome. So then this is a word cloud that came back from the parents' side. From the parents, and again, children, more, kids, time, recess, play. These were the words that were used repeatedly. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. So this is parent additional feedback.
I am not a teacher.
Okay, so he's presenting for a teacher. I got you.
I am also a teacher at another building, and my building converted from a 15-minute recess block to a 20-minute recess block this school year. The impact on students has been 10 minutes. We are seeing disaggressive behaviors, increase of student engagement, and focus on learning and interested opportunities for students to build and practice social and emotional competence. I strongly encourage direct to pursue increases recess periods.
Is that your first time reading? That was amazing.
It's not my first time.
No, is that your first time reading this?
Good job, buddy. Great job. Academics are stressful on our children, especially the children with learning disabilities. They need more than 15 minutes to clear their minds with friends to blow off stress in academics per day.
I'd like to see a minimum of a 30-minute block, but believe that additional 10-minute free play movement breaks built into the day would be ideal.
So again, that was parent, guardian, additional feedback. So these are the takeaways.
So our takeaways tonight, so I don't know if you can read that, but the green is the parents and the blue is the students. And so overwhelmingly, parents and students would agree that they'd like to increase recess by 15 minutes. That's their preferred response. The next one. We also asked, what else would you like to do to improve recess in addition or in lieu of adding time? And so the biggest groups here of responses was to add equipment, balls, jump ropes, and chalk, and to use playground and or fields more.
Okay, so this is a monster chart. So time on learning is something that the government checks with the school buildings. We have put all the schools together. The superintendent reported the time on learning and hours we have now, and we have broken it into how we could, by minutes per day, per school year, and converted it to hours. Took a lot of math. We've figured out that all the schools in the green could add 15 minutes right now, and it would not add any time to the day. The schools where the red is, we have a next slide to show you some suggestions that we have. So this will be on the website, or hopefully. So suggestions. So some suggestions, and these are all taken from different districts that have tried this. Use recess as an opportunity for students to practice self-regulation. So doing something restorative recess. We looked up, there could be restorative recess practices. Extra 15 minutes a day connected to any extras, PE, art, different things like that. And then based on DESE, right up the street, time on learning can be counted as time on learning as long as it meets the following two requirements. One, consistent with the curriculum for study of a core subject or other subject approved by the school committee, and is part of the program designed by a teacher. So that is what's defined as time on learning. That's what we've been told. Time on learning is the problem with why we can't add more recess time. So these were our suggestions. And then suggestions from the study. Just a shout out to the Forestdale, Mr. Concannon. They got this amazing recess cart with equipment. Easy, simple solution. We're asking for all schools to get it. Maybe all grades allowed to access more outdoor space. Could we get a rotation in so that some first graders can go to the playground, different places? Adhere to Malden recess policies. Please don't take recess away as punishment. K to 4, we're asking for a minimum of 30 minutes. 5 to 8, minimum of 20 minutes. And then we also ask, and this is the MEA as well, that we support the House and the Senate bills. The House Senate Bill at 330, an act relative to physical and social recess at schools, and then the House Bill act relative to recess for elementary school children. I think they're both asking for more recess time. And then this is...
And I also wish first graders at the BB school could play on the monkey bars and rings. And I love swinging from one side to another.
Kids need more recess because it gives them time to socialize with each other and get all that energy out. And if they don't socialize with each other, they're going to be talking during class, which could get them in trouble, possibly staying after school. And I know the school doesn't want to keep people out.
Hi, I'm Fernando O'Shaughnessy, and I go to the new school. I'm in 5th grade. Recess is very important to me because it helps me get all my energy out and have a very efficient day of focus in class.
Recess is important to me because we don't have a lot of time, and it takes a long time to get from lunch to recess.
Hi, my name is Ryan Rogers. I'm in the 5th grade BB school. I think we should have a longer recess to talk, play, and communicate with kids in other classes. This is why we should have a longer recess to burn off our energy, help us concentrate better in school, because if we waste our energy at recess, we'll stop fidgeting
older kids and young kids need additional recess time. As we grow up, we learn how to interact with friends and others that we don't know. And recess provides that unstructured environment where adults aren't helping each other every move, but we're still supervising if we need it. We have a chance to manage conflicts appropriately before they get out of hand. And without that unstructured face-to-face time, then when are we supposed to do that?
Parents who will be benefited by more recess. Number 1, kids. Number 2, staff and faculty, as well as teachers. And number 3, everyone in the school community.
That was cut down from 2 minutes. So that's us. That's what we have. Thanks, everyone, for your help.
So, Ms. Beardsley, this is something that we take under advisement. Do you want to wait till we get down to that section to discuss it further? Okay. All right. So 3, 4. Let's take up the Forestdale School 8th grade Washington, D.C. trip. Superintendent O'Teary.
Sure. Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to call up to the podium Principal Dawn Concan of the Forestdale School and Diana Sullivan. The Forestdale 8th graders are planning a field trip to Washington, D.C. The trip would depart on Monday, June 1st and return on Thursday, June 20th. It's of 2020 next year. Forestdale has gone down to D.C. The past 2 years ago. Had a very successful trip, and I think that they're here to ask for the school committee's permission for this upcoming year.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. This is historically a trip that the Forestdale takes every year. We did change vendors because we got a better price. So if you notice, the vendor has changed since last year. We do a lot of fundraising, and as always, we make sure that anybody that wants to go is able to go. We make sure that any student that wants to go goes.
Okay. You want to add anything, Ms. Sullivan, or?
It's a great trip. It's great to spend time with the students in Washington, and we'd love to go again.
All right. Let's open it up to questions. Superintendent, I presume you recommend it as well.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Iovino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Concanon, the trip is scheduled for June the 1st. Will you be coming back with us or giving us an update and letting us know how things are progressing and in terms of fundraising and children that are going to be able to attend, hopefully all of them?
You mean before the trip? Or,
yes, before the trip.
If you want me to, 100%.
Just email something to us? And
yeah, absolutely. And we'll let you know what the events that are going on for the fundraising and things like that.
Yes.
We can keep you updated.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Iovino. Now, Ms. Spatafora.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the usual questions I think we ask, obviously, medical, any students that have any medical issues that are taking medication, or do we have a nurse that's scheduled? And then, oh, go ahead.
That gets taken care of right from the folks that run the trip. All the medication is given out. There is somebody on duty all the time. There's medical staff, there's security at night. And everything, all that stuff is part of the package, and they're responsible for all that, and we hold them to it.
Okay. And then also on the information we were provided, it says $888 per student at a minimum of 30 students. So do we foresee there being meeting that minimum, or is there a potential that the cost will go up because we don't meet the 30 students?
We've met the 30 minimum for the past 3 years, and we had a record number of parents come to the parent information meeting this year, so I'm foreseeing more students, I'm hoping, I guess.
Could that potentially drop the cost?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spatafor. We're going to go to Mr. McCarthy, who will be followed by Ms. Beardsley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just a general question. What are some of the different places you guys are going to be going to during the trip? Are you guys going to be sightseeing in different areas? Just curious.
The Holocaust Museum, the changing of the guard. We do make a pit stop in front of the White House and all the monuments, breakfast with the senators or lunch, I think. Wow. The Vietnam Memorial, right? The World War I Memorial, I think.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Ms. Beardsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I asked this one time, scholarship. I know you're fundraising. You feel confident that every student that wants to go has the opportunity to go?
100%. Okay. 100%. We make sure that everybody that wants to go goes. Like I said, we look at the need at the end, and the faculty is always great. We make sure that kids are covered.
And I would love to see this at all the schools. I did it 30 years ago. Don't do the math, but it was the most amazing trip I ever took, so I'm sure. Good luck, and thank you for doing this.
I'm already in trouble with the recess equipment, so let's...
All right, thank you, Ms. Beardsley. Any other questions? Just an observation from the chair. I just wanted to compliment you on always trying to make this better. I mean, sometimes I see something goes on the same way, over the years, but it always seems when I read the information presented by the Forester, you're trying to make it better. For example, moving it from April to June, I think is ingenious. It makes a lot of sense, and hats off to you.
Well, we lose days with the rain, so
you're right.
We tried to accommodate
Makes sense.
that. Yeah, and we got to get through the MCAS testing as well.
Right. Yeah, I read that. So good job. All right. Once again, Superintendent, full steam from your perspective.
Yes, absolutely. I want to applaud the Forestdale. I think they're always looking to make it better. I think the switching of the vendors for a better deal, which ultimately makes it more affordable for our students and our families. I also think that they're very committed to making sure that every student who would like to go goes. So in that sense, I'm very, very happy with that. I think they've done a terrific job. Also, I just would say that when they've gone, they've been in constant communication with staff back here too, even on things that didn't become problems, but just to let us know. So they've been really responsive that way and responsible.
Very good.
I might go this year because I'd rather be there than take the calls. So.
All right. All right. What say the committee? Motion by Mr. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. Iovino. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody here opposed? The ayes have it. Carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank
you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. We're now going to go to item number 2 under the superintendent's report, English learner presentation, followed by our State Senator Jason Lewis. So Superintendent, you wish us to go out there for this presentation?
Yes, Dr. Ndara has a slideshow presentation, but at our last meeting, we spoke a little bit about the English learner population in the Malden Public Schools, and I said that at this upcoming meeting, we would have Dr. Yvonne Ndara, our Director of English Learner Education, come and give an overview about the program itself, some of the things that we've done, some of the programs and programming that we've added this year, but also just to give you an overview of the overall issue and the complexity of it. The total number of English learners in the district has decreased. However, the English learner population of the Salemwood, after initial decrease, has begun to increase again. So at this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Yvonne Ndara, our English learner and Title III director, to the podium to talk and give a presentation. I think that she'd like us to recess back to the chairs so we can see an overview of our English learner program.
Okay. I'm learning. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Superintendent Oteri and Major Christensen and school committee members. Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you a little bit about the ELE program here in Malden. I promise it'll be rather quick. I invite you to look at the next slide with me, please. And I know that many folks here in Malden are very proud of the fact that they are diverse, and rightly so. I wanted to show you this slide because it shows that not only are our ELLs bilingual or multilingual, many families in the district speak another language other than English. As you can see, there's actually 55.2% of our families with students registered in Malden speak another language other than English. The top languages are Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, and Haitian Creole. Moving on, I just wanted to give you a little bit more information as to what does our program, our department looks like. Right now, in comparison to the total population of students, we have 1194, so almost 1,200 ELLs out of a total population of 6,621. That makes it an 18% percentage of ELLs at Malden. We have 38 teachers, professional, outstanding teachers who are teaching our ELLs, or licensed teachers. We also have one coach, and as of right now, we have 2 positions that still need to be filled. So if you know some qualified folks, send them our way. The last 2 bullets, the assistants, the ELL assistants, we have 4 of them, and we have an office assistant. Those are funded by Title III grant. I wanted to show you a breakdown of ELLs in the schools. I'll give you a second to soak it in. I didn't pick red for Salemwood. It was done by the program. But yes, it gives us pause, right? Because the majority of our ELLs are in Salemwood. And that's not by coincidence. It's because since I've been here and years prior to that, I was told that Salemwood is the SEI school. So automatically, many of our children that are designated ELLs go to Salemwood. And so that's why you have such large numbers there. I also wanted to mention that out of those 468 students, 66%, let me just check my numbers here, 66% are SEI 1. That means that they are students who really need the most instructional time learning English. And that affects our teachers, our materials, etc. I also want to highlight that that number is constantly changing. So we might have that today, it might change again tomorrow. And sometimes when the school ends in some countries, other countries, in the middle of the year, around January, we get also a number of kiddos coming in. So the Department of Education recognizes SEI as an actual program. What is SEI? It's a shelter instruction program. And sometimes people get thrown by that word sheltered. So I just threw it in there. A sheltered classroom means where English instruction is used to make the content comprehensible for our ELLs. And that requires a licensed teacher. But the nice thing is that since the No Child Left Behind law went away, we have other options now. So that's why I put in there, one size does not fit all, because we might start thinking what other things we can do. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but just so you know, the SEI program here in Malden is really made up of SEI 1 and SEI 2. And as I said, most of the SEI 1 students go to Salemwood. So in our other schools, many of our kiddos are SEI 2. And that's considered, if you see the third bullet there, those are the developing and expanding levels. And that's what this refers to as transitional students, kind of on the way out, versus SEI 1, which are considered foundational students. They require more instruction. And how do we get instruction to our kiddos? We give push in and pull out. Sometimes the teachers goes and works with only a few kids. Sometimes they pull out of the classroom and works with them outside. Also, SEI 1 in Salemwood has self-contained shelter classroom. By that I mean that because of their numbers, they're able to have enough students in one classroom where all of them are ELLs. So they're not necessarily with the Main Street population. Something to think about. So what we're trying to do, or I think what I've been hearing since I've been here, is that can we change this? So I chose this word purposefully, the word transforming. So how do we transform our schools, all of our schools, so that they are able to instruct all children, all ELLs? And that can be challenging, of course. For example, the overall population has decreased slightly, but in Salemwood, even at the beginning of the year, it was high. We had at least 50 more students in Salemwood in October this year than last year, whereas all the other schools, they were slightly lower. And that's, again, because they were automatically placed at that school. We also found that 8th grade this year was really loaded with students. There were just too many students, and the class size was getting really big. We also found that it's difficult to hire dual licensed teachers because we want our middle school and our high school, I'm going to add high school as well, should be taught with, if they're going to be taught content and ESL, they will need to be dual licensed, and that's hard to do. It's hard to find those folks. And another challenge is that if we start changing how students are placed, we have to support our teachers that are used to only teaching SEI 2. We have to support them, figure out new schedules. So that's what I put on the other side. Figure out new schedules, give them the right materials so that they can do the job that we're asking them to do. We've also, at the beginning, the top one, we're starting to see how we can, when families come in with their kiddos, are we able to put them in the neighborhood school? So we can't go back because it would just be too many, right? We can't just say everybody is going to go to their neighborhood school. It's just not possible. So maybe as they're coming in, we're trying to see, can they be placed in their neighborhood school? We also invited some families specifically for 8th grade because it was so large, the class size, if they were willing to go to their neighborhood school. And we had at least 3 families who said they would. In the meantime, we're also encouraging teachers to get dual licenses. And until that happens, we are able to have teachers teach 20% out of their content. So that is equivalent to about one class. So as you can gather, this is not an easy thing, but Superintendent Oteri really takes it seriously, and we have reached out to several companies or what do you call professionals. We reached out to MABE, which is the Multi-State Association for Bilingual Education, and NESDEC, the New England School Development Council. MABE, of course, says that this is a long-term process. We can't do it overnight, but that we should take steps. And the steps that I outlined before really are baby steps, but they are nonetheless steps. And NESDEC, we've asked them for a proposal, and we realized that it would help us to have an audit that would deal with the spacing and how it can actually be carried out. And my voice is cracking, so I will go on the light side now. This is what's going on right now in the department. The continuing things that we're doing. We are continuing to have the ESL classes for our adults. We are continuing to have, we had it last summer, and we will continue to have the summer program. What's new? We have a tutoring program in all of our schools, most of our schools. It was kind of small last year. This year is comprehensive, and I'm very proud of the teachers who have stepped up and decided to do the program. We also purchased Imagine Learning literacy program. This was at Salemwood. Right now, we were able to purchase it for all the schools, so we have unlimited licenses. I've only heard good things from Salemwood, from the teachers who use it. So we're encouraging our teachers to continue to use it, and it will give us data so that we can see how our students are doing. It's really for ELLs. And what's the last one? Oh, the last one is important because if you're out there listening, we will need families to join. Well, we want to create an ELL pack. It would be for families of ELLs. It will be similar to a CPAC, which is the Special Education for Parents Advisory Council. I kind of wanted to take out the P because I figured it's not just parents, there's guardians that go. So we possibly could be the Malden English Learner Advisory Council. But they will have to vote on that because it would eventually be a self-sustained council. So parents who are interested, let me know. I'm going to look out for a flyer because I'm going to be sending out a flyer in multiple languages. Right? Okay. And I'm going to leave you with this little bit food for thought. These are some potential things that we might start considering long term. I'm going to plant the seed to the school committee. Perhaps we can look at other programs, such as a dual language education program. There are many different kinds of bilingual programs. That's just one of them. I went to a D's presentation where Chelsea presented on a program that they're doing, an academy that they're doing for their ELLs at the high school level. Amazing. I plan to continue the conversation with the principal. He's willing to have me go visit. And the last one is really exciting because it took many years for these to accept it and for it to pass law. And now we're able to have a seal of biliteracy. And what that does, it recognizes students who are already bilingual or multilingual, but they have to be at least proficient in 2 languages. And it will give them literally a seal in their diploma saying that they're fluent in 2 languages. And that helps them, perhaps it will get credit for college and other things that is favorable. And with that, I thank you.
All right. Thank you. And questions of the members? Any questions?
I'll just chime in.
Superintendent?
Sure. I just I hope we could get the school committee and the community is a sense of the scope of the issue that we have with our English learner program here in Malden, and also a bit of the complexity. So when Dr. Indara came to us last year, she has hit the ground running with her sleeves rolled up and with a real focus on making things more equitable and accessible for all of our students, particularly our English learners. So we started to unwind a little bit of the situation that we have in Malden where almost all of our foundational English learners are housed in one school, which in some ways solves a problem because we can provide the sheltered classes at each grade level, but it also creates an unintended consequence or something that wasn't thought of at the time where they're all housed in one program. It's an undue burden on some of those families to get there, and we don't have, it's also with our staff has created an inequitable situation. As the English learners numbers in those classes are high, the native English speaking class sizes in the Salem Wood have gone down. So there's an inequity within that. So Dr. Indara and I started seeing what we could do to fix that along with Dr. Chase. We had a meeting with the Department of Education, and they referred us to MABE, which is the Multi-State Association of Bilingual Education, and Phyllis Hardy, the director. We had a couple conference calls, Dr. Indara and I, with Ms. Hardy. I know that Dr. Indara went out to a couple presentations, and her advice is this is going to be a long-term untangling of this, at least a 5-year project. She, along with the department, suggested we maybe get some consultancy through maybe NESDEC, which we've talked to. I've had a couple conversations with Dr. Betancourt, the executive director. He has acknowledged readily the complexity of this and also the fact that there's not a model program that has gone through this. They've done something similar to this in a school system in Rhode Island, but they are looking to put together a proposal of what this would take. There will be, as I think her slide noted, a space analysis involved, but this would have to be something that's done in a thoughtful and very deliberate manner in order to make sure that we are providing the adequate level of and required hours of service in English instruction. One of the problems is once you get beyond the 4th grade, the dual certification kicks in so that you need a teacher who's licensed in a content as well as an English as a second language teacher. So those are hard. I know that we've had discussions, I have had discussions with the Department of Education. In fact, the commissioner and I were speaking at one of our local universities, and we were talking with one of the deans about where always looking for people. I mean, the unicorns, as we call them, is the person who's tri-certified, somebody in special education, ESL, and a content area. And we're always out there, quote unquote, hunting for that unicorn. Well, we really, in our education system, if I had my say in that, I would require all of our prospective educators to be tri-certified. So instead of hunting for that unicorn, we can create them. It did get some traction with some of our educators out there. I think Massachusetts needs to be proactive like California is and require all California teachers are certified ESL teachers. We have an SEI endorsement, but that's not enough to teach the class. All of our staff are SEI endorsed, but that just means that you're able to teach with students who are English learners or former English learners in your classroom space. So there's kind of another track that we are pursuing with higher education around getting all of our educators in that tri-certification mode. But that's certainly a long-term gain and something that we in Malden don't have much say on.
All right. Let's take a few questions. Ms. Beardsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you both, everyone, for responding to the Salem Wood faculty and looking into this inequity. I really appreciate that you guys are responding to families and faculty. And as one of these unicorns, I teach ELL and science, and I'm happy that we're looking into this and from different angles. I also want to look at the other side of the coin, which you also brought up, which I never understand when we have such a language diverse community, how we don't have a bilingual program here. And so that always, and I know we had one at the Forestdale. It wasn't completely, I don't know. I mean, I don't know the history. I know there was a Spanish dual language. I just, as someone who speaks English and some Spanish, I would love for my kids. It's something that I feel like we really desperately need in Malden. But thank you for looking into it.
And I could just add that, yes, a bilingual program would be outstanding because actually is research-based, that bilingual education can really be beneficial for our students. So if you're thinking about it, you have my complete backing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Beardsley. Mr. Iovino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions to the superintendent. With that increased number at the Salem Wood School, is space an issue?
It will be. And we need to do an analysis not only of the Salem Wood but of our other schools. So we do need to look at that. I think we've got a little bit of room, but
not much.
Our staffing is the bigger concern right now, or lack of licensed staff out there available for hire.
Have we thought about looking for newly retired teachers that might want to work on a part-time basis?
Yes, Dr. Ndara has, as part of the Title III grant, to hire some part-time teachers, so we are reaching out. We've got to get some names through our personnel office, but yes, we are considering that very strongly.
We're continuing to try to interview for the part-time positions. It's really hard because they are part-time, but I haven't given up. So that's continuously, we're trying to find more people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iovino. Ms. Spatafor.
Thank you. I'm not as well versed as some of the people up here in regards to the ELLs. So my question is, with the Title III grant that we received for the after-school tutoring that we're going to be providing at Salem Wood Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, do we foresee the ELLs that are attending this coming out of a foundation level quicker because of the added instruction time?
So as it happens, Salem Wood has decided to predominantly address the SEI 2 students because Salem Wood is primarily SEI 1. Mm-hmm. So actually sometimes what happens is the SEI 2 students, which are transitional, get kind of stuck there. So for now, they're concentrating on the transitional group, the SEI 2. But as a matter of fact, just today I sent them an email saying perhaps we can have another tutor work with the SEI 1, the foundational students. That's not to say that the other schools are not doing both levels.
And that was going to be my second question, because I know I kind of gauged it towards Salem Wood because they have the 3 days.
Right.
The other schools are 2 days, Tuesdays and Thursdays, am I correct?
Yeah, mostly so Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Just to amplify that, one of the concerns sometimes one has in the English learner education world is the plateau effect. When they get out of the foundational into that transitional level, we want to accelerate them and in the vernacular we use as FLEP, so that they're formerly limited English proficiency. So we want to get them there. That will accelerate. So you saw that 18% of our population are English learners. That means that they're currently receiving English learner services here. But the other graphic I think that is more telling, that really gives the portrait of our community, is that 55% of our students go home and don't speak English. So of that 55%, 18 are receiving those services, but we have 37% of our students are still speaking another language at home. And even though they might not be receiving the services, they're certainly not as comfortable as a native speaker in English. So I think we need to always consider that when we look at, particularly our gateway cities, but especially in Malden.
So just to touch upon that point, more of a reason that when we get into this SEI 2 level, that we are then taking the students that are at Salemwood, if we can, and pushing them out into neighborhood schools where they can learn with their peers and use the language in the day-to-day interaction with their peers, space being if it's available. But this is our end-all, like, down the road plan.
Correct. There's part of that, and it's also when and if the family wants to go to that. So one of the things we also see is that when students are and families are enrolled in a school, switching is, they've made friends and connections. They feel the support is terrific. So we do have, it's not as simple, these are people with families.
Relationships with peers.
Exactly. So we will do that when we can with the blessing and participation of that family, absolutely.
Thank you.
Other questions? Small potatoes, Superintendent, from the chair on the NESDEC piece. What is that coming out of professional services? They do specialized.
Well, I don't have a dollar figure on that, but it would be out of a consultancy line item.
Yeah, yes. Got it, okay. And of the 38 teachers that were highlighted in the report, does that include the new ones that were added by the committee last year?
So we added 3 ESL teachers. That's included within those 38, correct?
Okay. And Dr. Andar, I assume you're looking at, sounded like you're talking to other districts and trying to stay on top of the latest and greatest that may be happening across Greater Boston?
Yes, I mean, there's so many schools that already have different programs. As soon as the No Child Left Behind law was done away with, they embraced it, and this is actually proposing that we go for grants when we're thinking about new programs. So that's a venue that we can explore, and I'm all for that.
One other thing that caught my attention that I think is just as important, the adult ESL. If I'm not mistaken, was that run up at Malden High School last year?
Correct.
Yeah.
And we're having another one this year.
Yeah, let's connect, because last time I spoke with them, I wanted to see if there was some synergy between what they're doing and maybe some program that we have to help reduce the wait list. I think what they told me, they could do easily 2-3 classes more than what they're doing.
Yeah, it was a matter of finding enough instructors.
Right. Yeah, let's talk offline if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Maybe you can just connect with me via email.
Absolutely.
And we can set up a little bit of time.
Will do.
See if we can help on that end. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We're going to move on now. So our state senator, who has been leading the charge to provide more resources for our district, you would think, based on all the work he has done, we would have had him go first. But credit to him, he told me, let the parents and the kids make their presentation. I will wait until that is completed. So at this time, and it only makes sense at this time to have him up, because based on what we just heard, I think what he's done is going to help a lot of what's been discussed here this evening. So without further ado, let's bring up our state senator, Jason Lewis, to talk about the Student Opportunity Act. Yeah. We're getting our steps in tonight, everybody. I hope you're wearing those watches. So let's... that, Senator. Is that good? Okay. All right.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm State Senator Jason Lewis, and I have the privilege of representing the city of Malden and several other communities in the State Senate, and I also wear another hat, which is as Senate Chair of the Education Committee in the state legislature. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to discuss the Student Opportunity Act with you this evening. I really want to thank the members of the school committee for inviting me to come and share this time with you. And I'm particularly excited because all school districts across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will benefit when the Student Opportunity Act hopefully is signed into law. But communities like Malden that educate large numbers of English learners, like the presentation we just heard, and students who are low-income students and all of the challenges that comes with for those students and their families, those communities are going to be the particular beneficiaries of this legislation, because really the fundamental goal of this legislation is to make sure that we are equitably funding all public schools in Massachusetts. And currently, we know there are very large gaps in resources and opportunities, and it is very difficult for gateway cities and communities that do have large numbers of low-income students and English learners to be able to offer the same kinds of programs and services and opportunities that some of our wealthier suburban communities are able to afford their students. And that is just simply unfair. Every child deserves to have access to a great public education. It's also very appropriate for me to follow on from the presentation that was just made, both because it reinforces for me once again why this legislation is important, and because one of the key goals of this bill is to understanding the particular challenges that it takes to educate students who are not native English speakers. And obviously our immigrant population continues to grow, particularly in our gateway cities. And so making sure that districts like Malden have the support, have the resources to provide all the services that that English learner students need is paramount. All right. So actually, before I dive into the details of the bill, let me just give you a quick update on where we are in the process, because I know sometimes the legislative process can be a black box, and it is hard to follow what's going on. So this will be a little bit of the civics lesson for the evening. The legislation was developed by the Education Committee, and it was based on a lot of work that's been done for many years, both in the state legislature and outside. The Joint Education Committee, led by myself and Representative Alice Peisch, released the Student Opportunity Act back in September. That legislation was then debated and passed unanimously by the state Senate. But in the course of passing the bill, there were some changes made to it. The bill was amended in some ways, not major ways, but some minor ways. Then after that, later in October, the bill was debated and passed also unanimously, so bipartisan support, in the Massachusetts House of Representatives. And again, there were some changes made. So what is now currently happening is that a conference committee was appointed. I'm leading the conference committee for the state Senate, Representative Alice Peisch for the House. There's 3 senators, 3 representatives, and it's our job to reconcile the differences between the 2 bills. And we have been working on that for a few weeks now. And stay tuned. I am very, very hopeful that we will have very exciting news for you and all the families around the Commonwealth in the next couple days. Because what needs to happen, I should finish the story here. What needs to happen is the conference committee needs to finalize and agree on a final bill, report that bill out. Then the House of Representatives and the state Senate will have to vote on that one more time. And then it goes to Governor Baker for his consideration and hopefully his signature. So if things go hopefully well this week, this legislation could be signed into law potentially by early December. All right, so it's probably important to just briefly start with what the school funding formula is and what it's designed to do. the way we fund public schools in Massachusetts, which is also known as Chapter 70, the Chapter 70 formula, was put in place as part of the Education Reform Act of 1993. And at that time, it was a landmark piece of legislation, and this formula was considered highly innovative and was actually a model for many other states, because fundamentally the formula says that we should ensure every school district should have be equitably funded and have the resources that it needs to provide its students with a great education. And the roots of this go all the way back actually to the state constitution. The Massachusetts state constitution is actually the oldest written constitution still in use anywhere in the world today. It was actually a precursor to the United States federal constitution. And that constitution talks about cherishing, that's the word it uses, cherishing public education. So the value that we put in public schools, public education goes very, very deep. And I personally think it's something I'm very proud of in terms of being a Massachusetts citizen, is that we hold public education in such a high regard. So the formula was put in place, and at that time, again, it was considered really progressive and forward-thinking. How it works, and it is somewhat complicated, but this is a simplified version. So sort of 3 steps to it. The first step is that there is a foundation budget calculated for every school district. So think of this, it's literally like a big spreadsheet. And it calculates each year what what the budget should be, or the budget that is deemed necessary and adequate for each school district. So obviously it takes into account the number of students that are enrolled in that district at different levels, high school, middle school, elementary. It takes into account socioeconomic factors like the number of students who are low income, students that are English learners, and a number of other factors like that. So then once that's calculated, the next step is to determine how much of that foundation budget should be paid for out of local resources. So typically that's property taxes, and so that's how much the city or the town has to contribute from its resources. And then the final step is that the state then makes up the difference in what's called Chapter 70 aid each year. And Chapter 70 aid is about roughly $5 billion a year, $5 billion, and it's the second biggest part of the state budget. So the largest part of the state budget is our Mass Health program, which is our Medicaid program. Second biggest part of the state budget is Chapter 70 aid, and that's the state's share of that. So most of the focus of the work that's been going on for a number of years now and for the Student Opportunity Act is to fix step 1, which is the foundation budget, because although when it was put in place in 1993, it reflected what it actually did cost to educate our students, over time it has fallen out of date. It hasn't kept up with the number of students who need special education services and the acuity of those needs, hasn't kept up with the number of students that are English learners, hasn't kept up with healthcare costs, with new technology, lots of things like that. So that's why the main goal is to update the foundation budget. There is also a discussion underway, and the Student Opportunity Act does touch on this, in terms of how to make sure that what we're asking each municipality to contribute, is also fair and equitable relative to the resources that that city or town has. So obviously, even though we put in place the Education Reform Act of 1993, we did significantly increase funding for public schools through much of the 1990s. We do celebrate the fact that Massachusetts students perform at the top, when you compare to other states and even other countries, in basic skills like math and literacy, and all that's great. However, that masks the very, very significant disparities in opportunity and in achievement that we have, unfortunately, right here in Malden and, all across our communities for low-income students, students of color, and English learners. And you can see these disparities. On the left you have reading, on the right you have math. These very troubling disparities have persisted now for a long time. So we have made some progress, but there's a long way still to go. And so the Student Opportunity Act is designed to really help address the opportunity gap, and in so doing, we're very hopeful that that will really help us to move the needle on making sure that all students, can be successful and can achieve at their full potential. In order to come up with the Student Opportunity Act, it has been a very collaborative process. Big shout out to our school committees because they have been huge, very important voices in this process. I've had the chance to talk to all the school committees, obviously, in my district, but I've also traveled around Massachusetts over the last year and met with a lot of others as well. Educators, teachers, social workers, paraprofessionals, school nurses, librarians, all have been very important voices in this as well. Principals and superintendents have been incredible resources for us as we've put this together. Teacher unions, various other community advocacy groups, they've all been, at the table. We've had a number of very active forums and discussions, including one for our district that we actually held up at Melrose High School back in the spring. And again, we're not starting from scratch here. We certainly were drawing from previous legislation that had passed the Senate on a number of occasions. There's the Promise Act that many of you are familiar with, which is the Student Opportunity Act draws very, very heavily from the Promise Act. Governor Baker offered legislation earlier this year, so we obviously considered that as well. And there's also many other school finance proposals that had to do with things like the Special Education Circuit Breaker, the Massachusetts School Building Program, things that were outside of the foundation budget that we also looked at in the course of developing this legislation. So here's a one-slide overview. We could probably spend the next hour talking in detail about this. I'm happy to obviously answer questions, but I know to keep things moving along tonight, we're just going to do it on one slide. So 4 main areas. First and foremost, and I think most importantly, the Student Opportunity Act implements all the recommendations of the 2015 Foundation Budget Review Commission. That was a blue ribbon commission. It was bipartisan. It took a year to look at all the challenges facing our public schools and made recommendations. And all of those are implemented in the bill. So healthcare, the way we calculate healthcare costs is adjusted to reflect the reality of the healthcare costs we're actually seeing. And that's by linking healthcare to the rates in the Group Insurance Commission, which is the state's largest health insurance program. Special education, we adjust the assumptions in the formula regarding both the percentage of students that require special education and also the cost to educate those students. We significantly increase the rates. These are considered, they're called increments or additional funding amounts that the formula provides for English learners. So very significant increase there, again, to reflect what it takes, all of the services and programs and teachers and specialists to really serve our English learners well. And we also differentiate for the first time between elementary school English learners, middle school, and high school, because we recognize that English learners in high school face even more challenges than English learners, say, in kindergarten or first grade. Some of those students, as we well know in Malden, may even have come here from another country and have very little education even in their native language. So there's a lot of work that our schools have to do to help those students catch up. And then finally is how the formula treats low-income students. And this is the piece of the bill that I'm most proud of and excited about, because we will have the boldest, most progressive education funding formula in the entire country when this legislation is hopefully signed into law, because it really recognizes how challenging it is to provide the services and the supports and the resources that students who are growing up in poverty need to be able to have a chance and have the same kinds of opportunities that their wealthier peers have. And that includes, everything from class sizes to after-school programs, summer programs, early education for very young children, social and emotional supports, mental health resources, all of those things that we know are critical to helping those students to realize their potential. So the formula, at its core, that's the most important part of this legislation, is addressing what it takes to successfully educate low-income students. The formula also fixes, by the way, the definition and how we count low-income students, because that's been a problem also. It makes it clear that we are defining all low-income students as those who traditionally qualify for free lunch or reduced price lunch. So that is students up to 185% of the federal poverty level. And unfortunately, because of changes in school lunch programs, which is a good thing, because this has to do with school districts providing free lunch and breakfast to all students. But as an unintended consequence of that, the Department of Education moved away from counting using the free and reduced lunch forms. And so the system that they've been using since 2015 only really counts students up to 133% of the federal poverty level. So essentially, it's undercounting the number of students. This bill fixes that and makes sure that all the students who we would all reasonably agree, are low income, should be counted as such, and therefore the school districts that educate them should be receiving the additional funding that they need and deserve. So that's bullet number one. Bullet number two, so by fixing the foundation budget, that is going to certainly help a lot of districts, particularly gateway cities. But we recognize there are other challenges districts are facing, and we wanted to try to be helpful in other ways. So there's three other things we do here, all of which are going to also be important for Malden. First, the state is recommitting to fully fund reimbursements for charter school tuitions. So when a student leaves Malden and goes to, let's say, the Mystic Valley or another school, the tuition follows the child. We recognize that the Malden Public Schools don't suddenly reduce their costs just because a student left. And that's a very big fiscal challenge. State is supposed to provide reimbursements at least for a transition period, but we haven't unfortunately been fully funding those. This bill fully commits to funding those reimbursements over a schedule, which I'll show you, and it puts in place a mechanism to make sure that we do actually live up to our commitment going forward. Next, we recognize that special education, again, is very challenging, and for those students who require services that can't be provided in the district and have to go out of district, that can be very, very costly. The state currently helps with the tuition costs for those students, but not the transportation costs. We will now be including transportation costs in the special education circuit breaker, so districts will be able to get reimbursed for 75% of those costs. And then lastly, bless you, this may not apply to Malden right now because most of the schools have been rebuilt, but we are also going to be substantially increasing the capacity of the Massachusetts School Building Authority, so it has greater resources and more school building projects can be accepted into the funding pipeline. So to the extent down the road, when Malden does need to make renovations or upgrades or improvements to school building facilities, that will also be helpful because, again, right now there's a long waiting list essentially to get into the school building program. Districts have to wait many years, and we want to accelerate that so we have first-class modern school facilities in all across Massachusetts. And the third bullet, this isn't just about spending more money for the sake of spending money, of course. This is about investing the money to make sure it goes to closing those opportunity gaps for our students who are most disadvantaged. Again, students who are English learners, who are low-income students, who have disabilities, who are not getting the same opportunities today as some of their more advantaged peers. So we do have a number of provisions in the bill to make sure that the funds are going to that purpose, that there is input from school committees and parents and educators in developing school improvement plans, and that there's a lot of transparency for community members to know what the school district's plan is, how the district is planning to use these resources to address these challenges, and that is available to the public as well. In addition, we also create a new, essentially an innovation fund. We're calling it the 21st Century Trust Fund. We anticipate funding it each year with $10 million. That could grow over time. So Malden schools and other schools will be able to apply for special grants from this to augment and supplement the Chapter 70 funding for programs. So a great example might be presentation we just had about having a bilingual program in the district. I'm a huge fan of those programs as well. That could be an example. District wants to launch that, needs some additional support. This would be a way to go to tap an additional source of funding. And we specify, although all school districts can qualify, can apply for grants, districts like gateway cities, like Malden, will have preference in going after those grant funds as well. Finally, like any piece of legislation, there's always more work to do. You never do it all. So the bill does set up several reports and commissions and additional work that we need to get done. Some of that has to do with more rural schools in the Commonwealth, so not issues that we deal with here, but some other issues that we think need some further examination, and we expect to come back and take further action on later. All right, so what we're talking about as a result of all of this is a total of roughly $1.5 billion of new investment in our public schools. About $1.4 billion is going to be through the Chapter 70 program, and then about $100 million will be through the increased special education reimbursements and the innovation fund that I mentioned. In addition to that, also the commitment to fully fund charter tuition reimbursements, and the increased MSBA spending as well. To give you a sense of put it in context, the current amount, I think I may have said this before, of Chapter 70 in this year's budget is about $5 billion. So it's $1.5 billion is a pretty significant increase, obviously, over what the current spending levels. Now, the state doesn't have $1.5 billion just sitting around, unfortunately, so we have to be realistic about how we can phase this in. And we do want to make sure that the state honors its commitment, because the worst thing we could do is celebrate the passage of this bill and the new formula, and then if the state doesn't live up to our commitment, 2-3 years down the road, that would be devastating. So we've put in place a funding schedule that we believe, given our state budget and what revenues we project in the years to come, that we can live up to that and meet that schedule. So we're going to phase in the Chapter 70 changes over 7 years. We are going to phase in the charter tuition over 3 years, the special education transportation over 4 years. All right. All right. So to summarize for Malden. There is no one, not myself or anyone, who can give a precise estimate to Malden or any school district as to what exactly the impact of the Student Opportunity Act will be, because, first of all, we can't project everything that's going to happen over the next 7 years. The formula is very sensitive to enrollment changes. It's very sensitive to inflation rates. It's also impacted by local economic conditions and various other factors. So there's no way to say for sure. But I think I feel reasonably confident giving at least a range, an estimate of what this is likely to mean. So because of the increase in Chapter 70 aid, the increase in the reimbursements for special education students for transportation costs, and the increased circuit breaker, we're looking at somewhere between $20 and $25 million expected additional state funding to the Malden Public Schools each year once it's fully phased in. All right, so that's not tomorrow, but once this is fully phased in, that's the order of magnitude that we would be looking at from the Student Opportunity Act. So this next slide will probably help a little bit. So the first fiscal year, for those who don't know, the fiscal years start July 1st of each year. It's a fiscal year. The next column is the amount of Chapter 70 aid that the state provides to Malden. And I think it's roughly about half of the Malden Public Schools budget. So the MPS budget is about half covered by the city and about half covered by the state. And again, that's determined by the formula that determines that split, right? That's step 2 that I talked about earlier in my presentation. The third column is the dollar increase over the prior year, and the last column is the percentage increase. So if you go back to FY19, the state provided $49.3 million in Chapter 70 aid. That was a modest increase over the year before. It was basically what's called minimum aid. The foundation budget did not increase enough to trigger what's known as foundation aid, so Malden schools basically got the minimum, which is usually $30 per student. So that was a modest increase, 0.5%. it's likely that the cost went up by more than that for Malden schools, right? Now, in the current fiscal year that we're in right now, fiscal year 20, we actually started to phase in these changes. So what we did was, even though the Student Opportunity Act was not passed into law, we knew what we were trying to do. So when the Senate debated our budget back in May, we said, well, let's imagine this is passed. What would those changes be? And we then calculated that and did 1/7 of that, and that's what went into the fiscal year 20 budget. And that's where you start to see the increase kicking in, because you look at the increase, it was almost 4% increase in Chapter 78, almost $2 million, because we were starting to phase that in. And I was very happy to see that we were able to start adding some additional educators and other positions because of some increased help. Now, if we project out to fiscal year 27, without the Student Opportunity Act, we probably would be looking at somewhere in that range of $55 million to $59 million. Again, it depends on what happens with enrollment, inflation, and so on. But you'll see some increases in Chapter 70, right? But not huge. With the Student Opportunity Act, if that gets signed into law by Governor Baker, hopefully in the near future, we'd be looking at somewhere maybe as much as $80 million in Chapter 78. So that hopefully gives an idea. Now, I'm going to move to question discussion, but my closing thought would be, hopefully, again, when this is signed into law, then we have predictability and certainty about what is going to be happening. So even though we won't know the precise exact dollar amounts, I think it will be possible for the school committee, working with Superintendent O'Terry, working with parents and other community stakeholders, to really build hopefully a really robust plan for what the needs of the district are and what are going to be the goals and the programs and the initiatives that are going to be undertaken in the years to come to plan for that. I think there's a real opportunity to do this in a collaborative way and to be very thoughtful about it. The legislation does explicitly require districts to all produce these plans, and like I spoke about earlier, it has to be a collaborative process. They have to be shared publicly. There's a number of evidence-based strategies that are listed in the bill. Districts aren't forced to use those, but it certainly includes things like extended learning time where appropriate, and expanding time for teachers, common planning time, professional development, social services like wraparound services that students need, expanding access to early education for more young children. There's a range. Diversifying our educator and administrator workforce is specifically listed in the bill. So there's a range of these strategies that we know are effective. Again, but it will be up to the Malden, public schools, led by the superintendent, but again with input and recommendations from other stakeholders, and first and foremost, obviously, the school committee to make those decisions. And I really urge you, to get started on that. The first 3-year plan is actually due April 1st next year. We know that's a very ambitious date, but we want to really, push everybody along to start thinking about, given that these funds are going to start to flow, be as prepared as to spend them in the wisest way possible. All right, and with that, I will take any questions or feedback. All right, go back, switch around. Okay, all right.
That was great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
All right, questions of the members. Mr. Iovino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Lewis, it was really a very interesting presentation from our point of view, because we can see where we need to spend money, and if it becomes, when it becomes available, it will be spent wisely. But with all of that information, will that be posted? Is that going to be posted on our website? The information, this presentation.
Superintendent?
If the senator
I think that's
is okay
fine.
with that,
I mean, this was a public presentation tonight, so I would imagine that that's fine.
Yes, there's a lot of information there.
I think it would be great. We can put it. I can put it out on social media with the URL for it or whatnot. I think that would be great if you're willing to share that.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And I should add, there's a lot more information for any members of the school committee and also the public that explain in more depth, how this legislation works, including a presentation that I kind of narrated. So that might be helpful as well. And maybe we can include a link to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Iovino. Ms. Beardsley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of all of us and my students at home, and just all the work you've done, and just for listening to us and for listening to people. And I really appreciate your hard work and your dedication.
Thank you.
Ms. Beardsley. Ms. Spatafor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, in '93, we had a progressive formula. How can we be sure that this formula is going to do what we need it to do down the road? Are we confident that, we're looking 7-8 years out at a potential $80 million total? What then? Will we reconvene every year and make sure that we stay on top of this to make sure that we don't fall behind like we did in the past?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question, because you're right. Back in '93, I think everyone probably celebrated, we've got this great progressive formula. We're going to close those, opportunity gaps and achievement gaps. And we made a lot of progress in the 1990s and then fell behind. So we absolutely are cognizant of that. And the legislation does require that essentially the Foundation Budget Review Commission that did this work has to reconvene periodically. And it has to be at least no less frequently than every 10 years, but it could be more frequently than that. But that has to happen in order to then take another look. Okay, how are things going? Our foundation budgets now accurately reflecting what the actual costs are that our districts are facing?
Great. One more question. How confident do we feel with the changes the revisions that are being made right now that Governor Baker is going to be 100% on this?
So, we're very, very hopeful that the governor will be supportive of the final bill. As we've been working in the conference committee, we've obviously been consulting with his team to get any input from them, as we have been from all other stakeholders. And I believe if the House and Senate, hopefully even this week, are going to take up the final bill, and I expect it would likely, again, pass unanimously, which would mean obviously bipartisan, that I would expect the governor would support the bill.
So should we start making our phone calls and writing letters and making sure that we're behind? Okay.
Never hurts for the governor to hear from residents, particularly school committee members.
Absolutely.
So I think that's always helpful. Yes.
Thank you again for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Spatafor. Mr. McCarthy.
Just to piggyback on what Ms. Baird said, I just want to obviously thank you, Senator, for your tireless work and advocacy for education and really making sure that the Student Opportunity Act really becomes a reality. And so from me to you, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you.
Any other members? Mr. Froyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Lewis, I'd also like to thank you for all your tireless work to bring this to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Froyo.
And by the way, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to also give a shout out to the other members of the Malden legislative delegation, the House members, who've also been extremely supportive of this legislation and really also pushed hard for it to come up, be voted on and passed in the House of Representatives.
If I might, just from the chair, I think we have all seen how hard it is to actually pass something And in my 8 years, there were many times where I felt that he could have said, you know, we gave it our best shot. You know, we'll try it again some other time. He never did that. And again, what everybody said up here, you know, hats off to you. And then the other thing that I'll remember for a long time is just how much you have credited, you know, our community with helping you push forward, in particular, you know, to our student representative, yes. All the students at Malden High School. He just said on Saturday to a group of residents that, you know, he felt that Malden High School was very influential on helping us get to where we are. So again, on behalf of our city,
in fact, I'm sorry I didn't say that earlier in my presentation, because I do want to reiterate that publicly. You know, I had the chance to, as I said, travel to many different school districts and meet with many different groups, and the experience that the mayor and I had in meeting with a group of Malden High School students in the gallery was the one I remember the most vividly in terms of why this legislation is needed and why it's so important.
So we may have to put you on some other bills up at State House. All right, so there are no other questions? Ms. Bordnaro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to piggyback off what my colleagues had just stated, you know, the saying really is true, it does take a village. So I thank you and your colleagues, you know, for really seeing this through. And you're always out in the city. And I just want to, you know, thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, we'll have the superintendent close us out, and then we'll move forward.
I just want, on behalf of the students and staff of Malden Public Schools, thank the senator. About a year ago, we started conversations, a little over a year ago, with the Superintendent's Network around forums on this, and we hosted one of the 3 sites last January for Project Equity. And I think, you know, we have been fortunate and blessed to have Senator Lewis, who has been really the torchbearer for educational reform. I mean, this is I think he is this generation's bearer of that, and along with the state delegation here that represents Malden, I think put an enormous amount of attention, listened. I know that when he was shortly after he was named the Senate Chair of the Education Committee, really went on a listening tour of the state. And I think he received a perspective both of gateway cities and urban communities, suburban and rural. And I think he is very thoughtful of how he has approached this. And I think his policy architecture around this has been one that will benefit us many years down the road. And I just, I can't overstate the gratitude that we have. You are a true ally of public education, and of the most importantly to me, most impactful is that it has been of our kids and our families who are most underrepresented and not heard enough. And we need champions like that, and I want to thank you for everything you've done on that.
Thank you.
All right, and it's ironic, just behind you, to me, is one of the fiercest advocates that I've seen in my time as mayor, and that's Deb Oswaldo from the Malden Education Association. So, you know, to her and everybody else in the city, really, great job. All right, so let's give him another round of applause. I mean, all right, so now we're going to go back to the agenda. We're under the superintendent's report. We just addressed the Student Opportunity Act. We did the English learner presentation. We did the Forestdale School, Washington, D.C. trip. So we're going to hear from our superintendent now, who will also speak to the Early Learning Center report cards, Linden Innovation Plan, as well as other district updates and highlights. Superintendent O'Teary.
Sure. There are going to be some changes to the Early Learning Center report cards next year, and I'd like to call upon Principal Peter Dolan from the Early Learning Center to come and explain some of the changes.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening.
And trying to be brief because it is a long night. So this has been a 2-year process. We've already changed the other aspects of our report card. The social emotional piece we really wanted to take some time on and focus on. The state standards had changed. We used to use TS Gold. We no longer use TS Gold. So the report card did not match what we were doing in our classrooms. And also for parents to be able to understand what was going home was also difficult. So we tried to make it easier to read, and also the new assessment tool is much easier for our teachers, our educators, to be able to assess the students on what's really going on. So that's really all that we've been doing.
All right, let's take some questions. Any questions of the members? And Superintendent, before any members speak, can you lay out what the process is from here?
Yeah, at this point, I would refer it to our academic subcommittee for a presentation and a study.
And it would come back out for?
And it would come back out for an approval vote, correct?
If I could, I don't mean to put pressure on you, but we've been working on this and trying to get it in for the January. We only have 2 report cards, and we really want to use it this year. So if we could get it back next month, we'd be very grateful.
Okay, on your end? Okay. Unless you want to have it referred, right? Okay. All right, any questions? If not, we'll take a motion to refer to the academic subcommittee. Mr. Iovino?
Make a motion to refer to the academic subcommittee.
Seconded by Ms. Bordenaro. Everybody clear on that? So the intent would be the subcommittee would meet sooner rather than later, and we'll take this up at our December 9th meeting, hopefully. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. All right. Carrying on, Superintendent.
Sure. Moving on, the Linden Innovation Plan, every year there's an annual evaluation of that. Mr. Garcia has prepared that. It's in your packet. Mm-hmm. We would like to have that voted on so that we can then submit it officially to the state, because it requires a sign-off by the school committee and approval. I think there was some tweaking of the plan that Mr. Garcia and his team did this year, and what we're looking at is gearing towards the 5-year renewal plan, which is they'll start working on for 2021. But I'd like for the committee to move that on so that we can get that approved.
All right. What say you, committee? Any questions on what was presented? Any motions that you'd like to make? Mr. Iovino.
Make a motion to accept the innovation plan submitted by Mr. Garcia, principal of the Linden STEAM Academy.
All right, there you have the motion. Mr. McCarthy, you're seconding that. All right, so now it's properly before us. Any questions, queries, qualms, concerns? Hearing Ms. Beardsley.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, what are the major changes? Are there any major changes, or is it just status quo? I mean, I didn't see the previous one. So.
Nothing major. These were really updates to some of the programming that has gone on that's more accurately reflected. Anything major or structural would be part of the 5-year plan.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Beardsley. Anybody else? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. Back to our superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have major news from the Barr Foundation. Malden Public Schools will receive $300,000 from the Barr Foundation to further the work that they funded this year, which was $150,000. This work will continue where the previous year's work left off and begin the planning for post-secondary success. We are in a cohort with Hartford, Connecticut, Worcester, Manchester, New Hampshire, and Portland, Maine, and we received the full funding, the $300,000 for that. And that's a major tribute to Dr. Kelly Chase's leadership at Central Office, as well as Principal Chris Mastrangelo and the Barr Foundation team at Malden High School. We could not be any prouder. They did terrific work, a lot of work preparing that grant, and it came through where I had said that they were impressed with what we have here, with our data, with the potential, and they backed it up, and we're really happy about that.
Stop you there, Sue. I think that deserves a big round of applause. $300,000. Ms. Kelly Chase.
Kelly and Chris. So this will enable us to create more equity for our students, with many of them following concepts which will be expanded. A freshman academy with a true freshman orientation, the furthering of the Portrait of a Graduate program profile that we've been working on, and setting up programs to ensure post-secondary success. So this is seed money. We won't continue forever, but in the first year, an analysis of our student success was conducted, which included identifying early warning indicators. An audit of our curriculum was done through the lens of equity and student success. The high school team who worked with the BAR project visited model schools out in California and Colorado to see innovative ways to implement project-based learning, as well as ways to increase student engagement and pathways to success. The visiting teams were comprised of our administrators from the areas of English learner education, special education, STEM, humanities, technology, and student support services. So we got a real broad cross-representation, and we're really happy about the $300,000. But wait, there's more. The 5-district partnership was also awarded $200,000 from the Bar Foundation for a leadership development grant. And this is to help create leadership pipelines in our school. We have a meeting on this on Wednesday, but the higher education partner that we'll be partnering with will be Salem State University. So again, we're part of the 5-district partnership, and this is really a pipeline to develop future leaders of our educational facilities. And we're really, really happy about that.
Another round of applause. Yeah. Any chance in the next paragraph you're going to say you got $1 million?
Not quite. Under diversity, equity, and inclusion, Dr. Amante Jackson and the Malden Public Schools will host a town hall forum this Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Jenkins Auditorium. The meeting is open to all students, families, stakeholders, and will focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Malden Public Schools and the role of race. We'll also be hosting additional town halls down the road. One will be January 9th at the Forestdale, March 5th at the high school, May 7th at the Ferryway. Also on equity, the 5-district partnership, Malden was one of the 3 host sites on Tuesday, November 5th. We had 850 teachers there from Malden, Revere, Chelsea, and Winthrop. We fed them all. We had an incredible keynote speaker in Erica Battle. We had well over 20 workshops. I also want to thank Deb Oswaldo and the Malden Education Association. Deb was able to bring in speakers from the national level to host some workshops on social justice, some equity, some LGBTQ training. Dr. Battle hosted 2 workshops, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, as well as giving the keynote address. It was absolutely terrific. It went off extremely well. Couldn't have been prouder of that. The other 2 sites were Chelsea and Revere, and we had some staff that went to those sites as well. But it really, I think, galvanized a lot of the equity work that has been going on in the district. The kickoff for the Influence 100 program was held on October 11th at Framingham State University. Principals Abdel Sepulveda and Ray Garcia, along with Dr. Chase and I, attended. The Influence 100 is a program the Department of Education started to help diversify the Commonwealth's administrator and educator ranks. At present, 40% of the Commonwealth's public school students are students of color, but only 8% of the teachers across the state are people of color, and only 4% of superintendents identify themselves that way. And we joined this effort in order to increase diversification among our administrators and teachers. Along the same lines, we were one of 15 communities who were invited into the diversity network. We went out to our first meeting. I think there's 4 more through the year at the DCU Center on October 17th in Worcester. There will be one coming up in December. This is also a program that we hope will have some ancillary benefits in terms of recruitment of staff, as well as using some of the other districts and the community partners that are a part of this to help cultivate and sustain the diversity initiatives that we have going on. And lastly, under my report of equity, I want to talk about gender equity with bathrooms. We will begin to look at all of our gendered and all gendered options, specifically around bathrooms. I've begun receiving consultation and guidance from Jeff Perotti, who's the founding director of Safe Schools for LGBTQ students at the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Mr. Perotti is a consultant to schools for the department on gender equity. I've worked with him in the past. He is the leading authority on this and is absolutely fabulous. We as a district should want to offer as many all-gender options for our students as possible. Since we are aiming to provide as much equity for our students, this is a great opportunity for community and school leadership to initiate discussion around policies and best practices. The Department of Education, of Elementary and Secondary Education, offered some guidance on this matter, and in 2013 recommended to eliminate gender practices unless it is done for a thoughtful reason. Certain things we know need to be gendered, and there is a need for all gender options. We recognize that an important change often causes a certain level of discomfort, so we strive to be thoughtful and successful in this matter. I would like to recommend to the committee that we refer the issue to the policy subcommittee so we can develop a very thoughtful and meaningful policy that we can implement across the district. Moving on to the report, our MCAS presentation, which was scheduled for today, will be at the next meeting on December 9th. Our visioning work has begun. We developed a district visioning team. Dr. Laurie Likas is the consultant who's working on that. We had our first meeting on October 22nd. It is a rather large team. It's comprised of students, parents and guardians. We have at least one representative from each school, as well as a representative from the English learner community and a representative from the CPAC. We have school and district leaders and school committee members, as well as community partners, a representative from City Council, representative from City Hall, and somebody from one of our community agencies as well. We'll meet 3 more times. We have our next meeting on December 5th. There's one in January as well as one in February. This plan will serve as the official roadmap for improvement for the Malden Public Schools over the next several years, and it will define our shared vision for the future of the Malden Public Schools and the overarching goals and programs that will help us achieve that vision and the outcomes that will help us measure our success in achieving that vision. Update on the community eligibility provision. At the last meeting, I explained we are in the application process that began in August after consulting with Senator Lewis. We are now working with one of the community partners that's required as part of this analysis. Our food service manager, Omar Hernandez, can present more information at an upcoming meeting once we have a little bit of better idea where we're at. I think at the last meeting I said that I would keep the committee informed of this and allow the committee the opportunity once we have more information and an acceptance hopefully this spring and let the committee make that decision. We have a field trip that the Ferryway 8th grade is doing to see the movie Harriet, which is about Harriet Tubman. The 8th grade at the Ferryway School has organized a field trip to see the movie Harriet, which is a biopic regarding the Underground Railroad leader Harriet Tubman. I'm taking this opportunity to inform the school committee that the district administration team has approved the trip, but the Ferryway School will be sending a permission form home with the students that explicitly explains the nature of the field trip. This is an important movie, and it is rated PG-13. However, it does not come without some concerns for 13-year-old viewers, many of whom are students of color. The film does make frequent use of the N-word and shows slave beatings, and also depicts Harriet Tubman's own seizures. This may be upsetting for some students and their families, so they would have to opt in to send their student, give permission for this. A review from Common Sense Media, which is a trusted source for many parents, is that it's a historical drama around Harriet Tubman's evolution from a young married slave in Maryland to her escape to freedom in Philadelphia, and to her courage to becoming the Moses of the Underground Railroad. It stars Cynthia Erivo as Harriet. The film is intense. There's frequent use of the N-word as well as a few swears. Violence is often upsetting and is almost always aimed at black characters, both free and enslaved. White slave owners / catchers pursue, beat, and even shoot black men and women. There are brutal beatings. There is a few characters that die. There is some gun violence. Families are separated when slaves are sold, and the slaves tell stories of horrible things that they've experienced. Viewers learn how Harriet interpreted her visions and seizures as prescient visions from God, and how she ultimately took 19 trips to the South and escorted more than 300 slaves to freedom, demonstrating courage and integrity. Certainly is a very valuable film, but we wanted to make sure that the committee was aware that we did this in a thoughtful manner. Principal Sepulveda and central office had discussions around this, and we wanted to bring everybody up to speed. I just want to talk about the Early Learning Center space issue. As the profile of many of our students is changing at the Early Learning Center, we have an increasing need for specialized space and programs, and we seem to be reaching a breaking point on that. So I would like to refer this matter to the Space and Enrollment Subcommittee to evaluate some options going forward. I know Principal Dolan and his staff have some specific information and data that we may need to look and evaluate. In closing, just some reminders and upcoming events. Wednesday, November 27th, that's the day before Thanksgiving, we have an 11 o'clock dismissal. We will be back in school on Monday, December 2nd. Our schools are in the midst of having their parent-teacher conferences. Forestdale had theirs last week. Ferryways is tomorrow. Beebe and Salemwood is on Thursday, and Linden has theirs in the spring. I'd like to inform all school committee members of upcoming events at the schools during the holiday season. One of these events is the 15th annual Malden Parade of Holiday Traditions. This year it is on Saturday, November 30th, and the theme is diversity, and more details can be found on the Malden Public Schools website. And then lastly, with the elections behind us, I'd like to congratulate all the returning school committee members as well as the new members who will be joining us in January. I'd also like to thank Ms. Beardsley, Ms. Bordenaro, and Ms. Leon for their dedication, time, and effort, and have selflessly devoted themselves to the Malden Public Schools and their students. And that concludes my report for this week, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much, Superintendent. Let's take some questions from the members. Ms. Bordenaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for, this is regarding the gender-neutral facilities. I know that you wanted to refer to policy as being the chair of policy. What is the timeline? What are you looking at? Did you want something immediate? I know that obviously there's a concern about, that this is very time sensitive. So I'm willing to hold a meeting, obviously making sure everybody's available as soon as possible. So.
Now, can you just move the mic down?
Sure.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do this as timely as we can, and I've also, Jeff Perotti from the state would love to be there, and I think he could really help frame a policy with us because of his expertise. So if we can work, collaboratively about picking a date and getting him in attendance and help answer any and all questions, because he's advised many school committees around this area as well. So as soon as we can, that would be great.
Great. I'll send out an email, so we'll touch base. What's the time frame? Do you think? How quickly would you like to turn this around?
Let's make the motion. We could talk offline on
Sure.
The dates and times. Does that work?
Correct.
Yeah. So,
That would
Ms.
be good.
Make a
Bordenaro,
motion
you want to
to-
make the motion?
To refer it to policy.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McCarthy. So everybody clear on that? Any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. You still have the floor, Ms. Bordenaro. Did you have any other questions?
Thank you. I'm all
Okay.
set.
All right, we're going to go to Ms. Beardsley, and then Ms. Spatafora will follow her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's great, giving to this policy subcommittee. Is there anything we can do stopgap-wise at the Linden at this point? Because I feel like I've had transgender students, and this is something that's not, I think there's changes that can be made. I work at a building, there's plenty of bathrooms, there's something we can do now.
I think that we want to go into this thoughtfully around, we would have to look at the door locks themselves and some things around the safety of that. So I think we will engage in some discussions with the Malden Education Association as well. I think you heard that there's full support from their leadership, but I think we need to just do this so that it's thoughtful and that it's we make sure that we consider all options and safety within this. I think protecting our students is paramount in every level of this. So I think identifying it, and we can move forward with these. But I want to make sure that we've got a policy in place so that this isn't something that's taken away down the road. I think this should be formalized.
Correct. Thank you. And just following that, also education just around what it is, because I feel like I heard a lot of misinformation coming from the people. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, what is a gender neutral? Like, I feel like people get a misnomer of what it actually is. Do you know what I'm saying? So like, maybe if we could educate people, because I think even people in the audience had no idea what.
Right. So I think that was one of the purposes of getting this to a subcommittee so that we could bring in Mr. Perotti and give really an overview, because he was the one that started this in the state 26 years ago. Okay. So I think that there would be an opportunity for some community education on this, the terminology, and also what type of assignments have to happen with this.
Okay. And then just lastly, it's very timely with the Globe article. I don't know if you saw the Globe article that came out about post-secondary success with Boston area / Malden students. And I feel like being an educator in these communities, something we lag behind is checking on how are these kids doing 4 years down the road. Have they? And so I think that's. I just want to commend you for looking into that post-secondary, how they are doing and how we fare once we send them off.
Yeah, and I think also it looked, specifically at the foundational part of that transition from the middle grades up.
What you're doing.
So this is, one of the reasons we're so happy about the funding from the Bar Foundation is that it does look at the root causes, identifying those early warning indicators, addressing that, rectifying it, and then we want to track that for what the post-secondary success is of our students. So we're really excited about it. This is really cutting edge. When you look at the cohort that we're in, they're all, the major city in their state, and we're in a cohort with also the second largest city in Massachusetts with Worcester. So to be in that cohort and be awarded the full funding with it, I think is special. And it's we're a unique community here. We are the most diverse community in the state, and I think that with that comes some built-in challenges that we need to look at. And, certainly the post-secondary success, we want to make sure that this is really about equity, that every kid has that opportunity to succeed.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Beardsley. Ms. Spatafor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question on the Harriet Tubman movie. With the topic and how intense it can be, are we going to provide any sort of support to students that see the movie and may find that the topic is difficult
Absolutely.
to handle?
I see Principal Sepulveda nodding his head affirmatively on that. But we also wanted, having been a history teacher for many years, even showing clips to high school students, I would always preface it with that. This may be difficult to watch, but we always have that support there, and we know that many of our kids come from a background of trauma. So we do want to make sure that this is done in a very transparent manner, that this doesn't sneak up on any family. And if a student doesn't go on this, there's certainly no penalty with that academically. That we'll have ways in which they can be informed of that without watching. Sometimes the intensity of a film is very difficult for students. So we do have our adjustment counselors on the call for that as well.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spatafor. Just from the chair to our clerk, if we could send out those dates for Dr. Amante to the entire school committee so they can adjust their schedules going forward. I think there were 3 or 4 dates mentioned coming up.
Those are just for regular town hall meetings.
halls,
That's not for
right,
Dr.
yeah.
Amante.
The town hall meetings,
Sure.
I meant. And there was another motion that had to be made, Superintendent? You were hoping?
We did the bathrooms and
Yeah,
ELCs,
ELC.
right, which I think you,
Do
we
we
did the
already do
motion.
that?
We just,
Okay.
we did it, didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh, just the ELC space, the report card.
Yep. Was there anything else, Sue? I thought you mentioned.
That's on the agenda, the ELC space for the Space Enrollment Ad Hoc Committee.
So you want to refer that?
Correct.
All right. Who wants to
Correct.
make that motion? Motion by Mr. Froyo, seconded by Mr. Iavino. Any discussion? Everybody clear on that? This is a result of the superintendent's report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. Thank you once again, Superintendent. Let's drop down to item 4, subcommittee reports and discussions. First, we'll hear from Mr. Iavino on where we are space and enrollment-wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The enrollment from Malden Public Schools as of this past Friday was 6,614. It's an increase of 79 youngsters since the start of the school year, but a significant drop from where we were last year.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Hearing Ms. Beardsley, do you have a question?
I do. I thought we asked already to have more of a breakdown to see where the actual numbers are coming from, grade-wise slash.
If I could, we had
Please.
talked about that. I think the last meeting, where I said that there was a bubble of grades 5, grade 6, and grade 7, and then at grade 5, 6, 7, and 8, then it drops off. The numbers of 75 youngsters down is mostly from the high school. Youngsters from high school numbers are down from last year. That not all 75, but most of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think we addressed item number 2, which is the recess presentation. It's worth saying again, well done, Ms. Beardsley. And you wanted the committee to just take that under advisement? Yeah. Okay. And look it over and, okay. Let's go to Ms. Bordenaro, who's going to talk about policy and procedures. I know some work's been done there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been a lot of work. I'm really proud of our committee for all the work that we have done. Mr. Chair, would you like me to go, I know under motions resolutions, there's a couple of items that go with, obviously, the Policy and Procedure Subcommittee. Would you like me to go one by one and touch upon each of them? Or
Yeah.
do you want to do that separately?
Why don't we take it up now? Any objection? Chair has none.
So the first one is the K-8 student handbook, which I think everyone, I know it's the time, it's getting late, so I'm not going to read everything onto the record, but it was in our email. It's like 70 pages long, and I don't think there was anything there's no questions or concerns from the members.
What was the vote?
It was unanimous.
Okay. So you're making
I'll make a motion
to adopt.
To adopt the K-8 student handbook.
Seconded by Mr. Iavino. So let's take any questions from the members. Any questions? And Superintendent, this meets your expectations?
Yes, we had our attorneys from Murphy, Toomey, Hesse, and Lehane review this. Attorney Elizabeth Sherman took the lead on this. She is a specialist in that office that has done dozens of handbooks across the state, so we were able to get the benefit of the most up-to-date policies around student issues, whether it be discipline, field trips, permissions, and whatnot. Okay. So I think it's accurate and up-to-date, and it hadn't been really updated in a comprehensive manner in several years.
So if we were to do this, it would take effect immediately or the new school year?
No, immediately.
Okay. All right, there you have it, everyone. So any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Staying with Ms. Bordenaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The second one I'm actually going to defer to Mrs. Spatafora, who I just want to thank, and I do appreciate all the extra time that you put into creating and drafting a policy for all of us. So, Mrs. Spatafora, if you want to take over and talk a little bit about the enrollment of the children of school department personnel.
All right, so the next item is what Ms. Bordenauer just said, policy for enrollment of the children of school department personnel. Let's go to Ms. Spatafora.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bordenauer. Thank you for that recognition as well, because we have been working on this for quite some time. And as I come before you tonight, we had created a policy. We had made a motion to bring it forth, and then we were notified that we were not following a certain aspect of Massachusetts general law. So, having worked on this policy for so long, I'm hoping that we can actually amend it on the floor. And if you'd like, I can read the policy to you and let you know what the amendment would be. And what the amendment is according to Massachusetts General Law, Title 12, Chapter 76, Section 5, no school committee is required to enroll a person who does not actually reside in the town unless said enrollment is authorized by law or by the school committee. When we created this policy, we actually left it into the hands of the superintendent. So according to law, it actually has to go by the school committee. So what we're looking to do in this amendment is to change the wording where it says it must come before the superintendent. We would like to add and the Malden Public School Committee. By making that amendment, we'll be following exactly. I don't know if you want me to read.
No, let's first just make sure that comports with what you're thinking, Superintendent. 1 second, Mr. Iavino. Let me just, Superintendent, does it make sense on your end?
Oh, I think they received legal guidance from council.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Iavino, you have a question?
No, I was just asking Mrs. Spatafora where you want to insert in this, what line, this second, third?
I'm sorry.
Wonder if you just dropped the last paragraph.
Drop the last.
What was the last paragraph?
The last paragraph is a substantial hardship.
Oh, yeah, that's
paragraph
right.
that we can't
drop. If I may add, if I may interject, I think what we wanted to do was wherever you see superintendent of schools, you just add
And the school committee. That's fine.
School committee.
Fine.
Yeah.
So wherever you see those words, you're adding and school committee.
Amen.
So you're not dropping, we're not dropping anything.
Sorry about that. If
No,
I can
no
clarify
problem.
that.
All right, so let's first take up the amendment. So you're moving the amendment, seconded by Ms. Beardsley. So any discussion on the amendment? All's in favor on the amendment?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Now the policy as amended, correct, Ms. Spatafora? There's nothing else to add to what they've already seen. Everybody's clear on it.
Everything else.
This has been around for some time.
Yep.
Motion by Ms. Spatafora, seconded by Ms. Beardsley. As amended, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody here opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. And now back to Ms. Bordenauer to talk about access to education, student privacy, and immigration enforcement policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm not going to read it verbatim, but we all received this in our packet. This is really just to protect our students from any third party trying to access our schools, trying to gather any type of information or disrupt them in any way, removing them. This policy is to ensure that all of our children are protected.
Okay. Motion by...
So I'll make a motion to adopt this policy.
Okay, seconded by Mr. McCarthy. Everybody clear on this? Any questions on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. And that's it, Ms. Bordenaro?
Yes, thank you.
No, thank you. Item number 4, I believe we addressed, Superintendent, ELC report cards. So that's been referred to committee. Recess resolution, Ms. Beardsley, is that something we are taking up, or are we? So to you? Okay, Ms. Beardsley?
We've already passed a recess resolution. I just wanted to do the addendum to
Right.
it. So I sent it out to everyone.
Right.
It's basically, we had those slides. If the time on learning has not been taken up, the suggestion is that 30 minutes for K to 4 and 20 minutes for 5 to 8.
And it's implied that we would have to bargain that. We'd have to meet with the Malden Education Association at some point.
Correct.
To
that's out of my
memorialize
jurisdiction.
this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Just, we're not adding time, we're not changing anything, we're just trying to, okay.
right.
Yep.
So Superintendent, does it make sense on your end?
Yes, it would have to be bargained because it would impact the schedule of the school, and scheduling is a mandatory subject of collective bargaining, so that would have to be negotiated, correct?
Okay. So everybody clear on what Ms. Beardsley's saying? If that were to happen, this is what she and the group that worked out on this recommend. Everybody clear on it? So Ms. Beardsley, you're making the motion.
Yes.
It's seconded by Ms. Spatafora. Any further discussion on it? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. So that carries unanimously. Again, good work, Ms. Beardsley. Substitute teacher pay rate. So we have a budget subcommittee report by Mr. Froyo, and I assume he's going to discuss this. Let's go to him.
The Budget Subcommittee met on October 21st and unanimously came up with figures for a substitute teacher that has a degree and a substitute teacher that doesn't have a degree. Substitute teacher with a degree would make $95 a day. A substitute teacher without a degree would make $75 a day. It was unanimously voted at the meeting.
All right, let's get it properly before. So a motion, Mr. Froyo, seconded by Mr. Iavino, correct? All right. Any questions on it? Ms. Beardsley.
It doesn't have to be a question, just full support
Sure.
of it as a teacher and who's as a parent of students who have been at, things have been happening with substitute teachers. I just think if we could just up the pay raise and get more qualified people in there and pay them what they deserve, I'd fully support it.
All right, and if I might from the chair, so again, you've said this before, I just want to have it reiterated, Superintendent, this is something that you will do within the existing budget.
Correct.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. Let's stay with Mr. Froyo because we're now under motions and resolutions. The next item is school council members.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we just accepting these lists, right? We'll have to vote on it?
Superintendent?
Yes, it's required every year that we formally accept the members of each school site council as members. The committee approves that. So this is our annual presentation of that. It's after the first required meeting by law, which must take place, I think, by the third week of October.
I have one question. Linden STEAM Academy, some of the members of that committee, their name is down here twice. Is there any reason for that?
Unless it was just an oversight typographical,
Yeah,
but I'm unaware
All right,
of that.
other than that, I make a motion that we pass this.
Is there a second by Mr. Iavino? So, Superintendent, does it have to be amended then? Because I assume this is heading to the Department of Education.
It doesn't go to the Department of Ed. But we'll check that clerical issue
okay.
if there is one there. Yeah.
Okay. Any questions then? All's in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. That carries unanimously. Mr. Froyo, Linden Innovation Plan. We already took care of
Yeah, we already took that up.
So that's been addressed. Okay, item number 9, World Unity Inc. resolution. Mr. Sepulveda, is he still here? Could I have you come up, Mr. Sepulveda, just for a second? Yes. No worries, no worries. I probably caught you off guard. I thought it would only be appropriate just to have you up before we act on this resolution, because last time we met was before the absolutely wonderful performance that occurred at the Boston Marriott. So I just wanted to give you a chance to, tell the committee what happened and talk about the importance of adopting this resolution tonight.
Okay, so
who was that? First and 8th grade that organized that, right?
For the World
Boston
Unity,
it
was actually Miss O'Connor,
right.
Jacqueline O'Connor, our K4 music teacher. I shared with her the song from that was composed after the Sun poem, and she immediately looked at the lyrics and the tune and how actually very much aligned to what we believe as a district it was, and she decided to teach it to our kids. And not only did she teach it to our K4 students, she took time out of her prep time to teach it to our 5th through 8th students. And we got invited to the World Unity Inc. Gala. I believe this is the 17th or 23rd gala that they've done, and we performed it, and we had over 78 students there. One of our 7th graders was the accompanist, and he actually learned the song that week because he hadn't actually been practicing with us, and we decided that we needed a student musician so that Jacqueline O'Connor could conduct. We have administrators, we have teachers, and we have Mayor Garrison join us on stage, and it was a very moving experience.
Yeah,
and our students left a mark on the foundation, and what is more important than that is that the song and the poem is leaving a mark in their hearts and in their souls. And they walk around the school and their houses singing "We All See the Stars," and it was really a moving experience. So thank you.
Thank you. And so World Unity Inc. was hoping that the school committee would further support the work that occurred in Boston by adopting this resolution, which the city of Boston has done in other cities. So that's what's before you this evening. Any questions on it? So motion by Mr. Iovino, seconded by Mr. Drummy. No other discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. So that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you,
Principal. So now what the game plan is, we'll take points of personal privilege, and then we'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of contract negotiations. Mr. Left to right, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to obviously publicly thank all of my friends, neighbors, and supporters down in Ward 2 for giving me their vote of confidence in this last election cycle here in the city. Obviously, with all of the other candidates that were successful in their races as well, congratulations. I look forward to working with all of you and to all of the other members here on the committee in the next 2 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Mr. Drummy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things to touch on. The parent-teacher meeting tomorrow night. The Ferryway PTO will be having a bake sale during that time. And on the 27th is Spirit Day at the Ferryway, which is also an 11 o'clock early dismissal. Congratulations to everybody that won. Congratulations to all the 3 members that will be coming in. I see Adam sitting out there. Welcome, Adam, back. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Enjoy your holiday. Thank you,
Thank you, Mr. Drummy. Mr. Iovino.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just want to mention that on Monday, December the 2nd, the Malden High School Choral Arts Society will be performing at the Massachusetts State House. And anybody that has been to that program always circles it on their calendar. It's an absolutely wonderful program under the direction of Mr. Todd Cole. The youngsters gather at the grand staircase and the acoustics in the State House. If you've ever been there, it's something that if you haven't been there, you should try to make it on December the 2nd. I believe it's at either 10 or 12. I will check that time with Todd Cole, and I will send an email so that we can get that publicized.
Please.
Wonderful experience.
Thank you. Mr. Froyo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to thank the voters of Ward 8 for returning me to the school committee. Also, on Thanksgiving Day and Thanksgiving morning, Malden will beat Medford. That's a definite prediction.
All right.
And one other thing: after the holiday parade, the Malden High School Alumni Association will be having a pasta supper, the annual pasta supper, at Anthony's at 5 o'clock. So right after the tree lighting, head down to Anthony's for some good pasta and meatballs.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Froyo. Ms. Spatafora.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to try to make this quick. Updates for BB. So tomorrow, Tuesday, November 19th, the BB School Council will be meeting at 5 p.m. in the BB conference room. Thursday, November 21st, Parent Conference Night, 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Also, Thursday, November 21st, is the BB PTO meeting at 6 p.m. Tuesday, November 26th, the third grade music concert will take place at 1 p.m. Friday, November 29th, the tree lighting at Fellsmere Pond will take place at 6:30 p.m. with cookies, hot chocolate, Santa Claus, and I'm pretty sure our mayor will be there as well. That's in addition to the library. Oh, it is. So there's one at the library right after the parade, and then at 6:30 we do the Fellsmere tree. Just a reminder, every Friday is Bulldog Friday at BB, where students and teachers are encouraged to wear their BB gear or Malden Public School colors, blue and gold. We are back to collecting the Entenmann's Little Bites snack bags. It was part of a recycle program through TerraCycle. BB must collect a minimum of 900 bags before we can send them in, but for every pouch we collect and return, the school will earn 2 points, and those points accumulated throughout the year have the potential to earn funding for the school. And lastly, I just want to wish our educators a wonderful American Education Week. So thank your teachers, administrators, educators, everybody that's out there doing a fantastic job for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spatafora. Ms. Beardsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Forestdale and the Salemwood. So Forestdale Canned Good Drive starts December 2nd. It benefits the Malden Bread of Life. Over 6,000 canned goods have been donated for the last six years. The Forestdale School Council meeting will be December 10th, 6:30 at the library. Any students or parents who would like to participate in the Holiday of Tradition Parade can sign up at the school. And then at the Salemwood School, the coat drive is going on. They accept new and slightly used coats to be donated. Can drop them off at the main office. The book fair is Monday, November 18th, so today until the 22nd in the library. Parent Guardian Educator Night is this Thursday, November 21st from 6 to 7:30. Texas Roadhouse Fundraiser, Tuesday, December 10th, 2019 in Everett. And then the Winterfest K-4 and 5 to 8, December 14th, 2019. I keep saying that, 11 a.m. to 1, oh my God, help. 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then also, if anyone would like to donate a cooked turkey, needs to be sliced with no gravy, or a frozen turkey to the Bread of Life, they can bring it to the Salemwood by November 27th. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Beardsley. Mr. Iovino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very neglectful in not having thanked the voters in Ward 4 for returning me for another term on the Malden School Committee. I also want to wish our staff and our parents and our students a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mr. Iavino. So what will happen next, if the committee agrees? By a roll call vote, we'll go into executive session for the purposes of contract negotiations. We may come back out and vote on some of the items that are on the agenda, and then we will move adjournment. Motion by Mr. Iavino, seconded by Ms. Spatafora, to go into executive session for the purposes of contract negotiations. Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Bernardo?
Yes.
Mr. Drummy?
Yes.
Mr. Froyo?
Yes.
Mr. Iavino?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Spatafora?
Yes.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes. School committee will now go into executive session. Okay, school committee's back. We'll entertain any motions. Mr. Iavino.
Make a motion that the Malden School Committee accept the proposed contract that was agreed upon with the custodian workers. It was passed 9-0 in executive session.
Seconded by Ms. Bordenaro. Any questions?
I meant there's 8-0. It was 8-0.
All right, let's have the clerk call the roll.
Ms. Beardsley?
Yes.
Ms. Bernard?
Yes.
Mr. Drummond? Yes. Mr. Froyo?
Yes.
Mr. Iavino?
Yes.
Ms. Leon? Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Spatafora?
Yes.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes. That carries unanimously. Any other motions?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that the Malden School Committee approve the contract agreed upon for the Unit B administrators in the Malden Public School, again voted 8-0 in executive session in favor of.
Seconded by Mr. Drummy. Any questions about it? Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Beardsley?
Yes.
Ms. Bernard?
Yes.
Mr. Drummond?
Yes.
Mr. Froyo?
Yes.
Mr. Iavino?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Spatafora?
Yes.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes. That carries unanimously.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Iavino makes a motion to adjourn, seconded by Ms. Spatafora. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? School committee is hereby adjourned.